Okay, good evening, everybody. Can everybody hear me?
Sir.
Okay, it's 7:30, and I would like to call to order the Old Bridge, New Jersey Planning Board meeting for this evening, November 30th, 2021. And if we could all face and salute the flag for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge of allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America,
to the republic
to the
which it
republic
stands,
for which it
one nation,
stands, one nation,
indivisible,
under
under
God,
individual, liberty, and justice for all.
justice for all.
Justice for all.
Okay, in Dawn's absence, have somebody make the announcements and do the roll call, please.
Adequate notice of this meeting of the Old Bridge Township Planning Board has been provided in accordance with the Open Public Meeting Act at least 48 hours prior to the commencement of the meeting by prominently posting in the municipal complex an announcement giving the time, date, location, and the agenda of this meeting, mailing such notice to the Home News Tribune, and filing a copy of such announcement with the municipal clerk. Mr. De Palma?
Here.
Mr. Renner?
Here,
Mr. Lauer?
Here.
Mr. Mamakis?
Steve is not present this evening.
Ms. Cannon? She's not present this evening either. Mr. Schmitz?
Here.
Mr. Lenning?
Here.
Mr. Pink? I do not see Mr. Pink. I know he is going to attend, so I'll just wait. Chairman Marucci?
Here?
Mr. Petty? Mr. Garcia?
Yeah.
So Mr. Mamakis, Ms. Cannon, and Mr. Pink and Mr. Petty are not present.
Do we have a quorum?
Yes, we do. Sorry.
Yes, we do.
We do, okay.
Marty just joined as well.
Yes, I see Marty now. Okay, and so we've got Marty, and we'll get started, and if anybody
Yes.
else pops in. Okay, so the first, and Vina, correct me if I'm out of order on the agenda, but it seems to be the most current. And we'll start off with the minutes from October 5th, 2021. And do I have a motion on the minutes?
I'll move it.
Moved by Mr. De Palma, and a second?
I'll second it, Ernie.
Who was
Second by
that?
Mr. Lennon. Okay, now moving on, we have 3 completeness waivers.
We need to take a vote, right?
Oh, I'm
Sure.
sorry, yes, I'm sorry, I jumped ahead. I'm good for that.
Mr. De Palma,
Yes.
Mr. Renner,
yes,
Mr. Lauer,
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz,
Yes,
Mr. Lenning,
Yes.
Mr. Pink,
Marty, you're muted. I read his lips, though, he said yes.
Yes.
Mr. Marucci,
Yes,
Mr. Garcia,
Yes.
we can proceed with the next.
okay,
one.
so that completes the vote, okay, thank you. So now, moving on to the completeness waivers, we have 3 of them, and the first being 42-2021P, which is Segma Old Bridge GC LLC, and attorney Mark D. Policastro.
Actually, Chairman Marucci, I will take over.
Okay.
I just want to give a brief introduction to these applications. As you may recall, at the beginning of the year, the Planning Board and the Township Council approved an area investigation study for properties along Jake Brown Road and Route 9 and Jake Brown Road and White Oak Lane extension. Subsequently, the council adopted a redevelopment plan. These three projects are actually related to the redevelopment plan. Application number 42-2021P is for an application to build 4 warehouse buildings on Glenwood Country Club site. The application 44-2021P is a parcel that currently contains the Board of Ed building, and it's again for a warehouse. And the third application is for Jake Brown Road South 45-2021P. And I introduce all three at the same time because you will notice that there are 5 waivers requested. All 5 waivers are, it's the same waivers for all 3 projects. And all the 5 waivers are actually more technical in nature. It's not that the applicant is not willing to present it or is not willing to provide it to the township, but some of them I requested. Some of them are related to capital improvement projects, which might take a little longer while the township officials, we and the applicant's team work on it. So item 2 pertains to the number of sets that are required based on our checklist. And as you all know that I had sent out an email because these applications are so huge. And I'm sorry, I know Regency is hearing because I had them submit all copies, but this was an afterthought after Regency had submitted that we have been asking for so many copies, and it's because the applications are huge, it's difficult for me, especially not having a planning board secretary, to get them delivered to the board members. So we started sending everything digitally and we started uploading everything on the website. Now, with these 3 applications, I really don't need as many copies based on the checklist, but because it's a checklist item, it has to be waived by the board. I don't have the authority to waive it, and that's why the first item is on the list. The second one is item 31, new block and lot numbers. The applicant has already made a request to the engineering department. I have seen the emails being exchanged, and it's not that they didn't want to provide it. It is coming, but the engineering department needs some time to assign those new numbers. So it's a temporary request. All the waivers requested are temporary in nature. Item 39B, profile of all streets adjoining the project. This is part of a redevelopment plan. All 3 projects are part of a redevelopment plan. There's significant capital improvement associated with it. There is redesign of roadways, there's designing of certain streets. So at this point, the applicant may not be able to provide it. They're working very closely with the engineering department. So the applicant will produce it when it's ready, but at this time, they're requesting a waiver. Item 40C, location of existing wooded areas and general size and type of predominant trees. I actually received a submission at 4:15 this afternoon. I haven't had a chance to review it, but this is actually no longer required. It's not a waiver that is currently required, but upon my review, the applicant will also be submitting a
I lost my audio.
I'm not sure who said that.
I'm sorry, I heard somebody say I lost my audio. Who was that? Okay, Vina, you can continue until.
All right, so item 40C is no longer required. I'm in receipt of this item, and then 52 is related. Item 52 is related to 40C. The applicant will be providing it upon my review of the submission that I got this afternoon. So all the waivers requested for all three applications are temporary in nature, and I recommend that the board grant those waivers.
Okay, now for the record, Vina, are we voting on all three of them simultaneously?
Joe,
Or
can
do you
you
want to vote on
provide-
each one?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I was going to jump in on that. I think just for clarification purposes, let's do a separate vote. It shouldn't take that long for each one.
Okay,
That way, it's just clear, that each application had its own number, the waiver is being granted for each one. And, just with regard to the vote, I think it should be noted that with regard to items number 31, 39B, and 52, that they are going to be provided at a later time. So these are temporary waivers being granted. It's granted just for completeness purposes, but it's understood by the board that these will be provided at a later time in connection with the overall application process.
okay, thank you. And again, for the record, Vina made the presentation in lieu of the attorneys presenting. So just to have that on the record. Okay, so I think Mr. Sordillo summed it up pretty well. And we're ready to vote?
Yeah, just one question. So some of these looks like we may have to do some amending, right, to the checklists if we're going to be doing everything
Yes.
virtually and all of that. So
Yes, that is correct. Actually, going through the checklist, it's not just the paper copy submission. There are a few items on the checklist that are outdated, and I do want to eliminate them from the checklist. So that is the first thing I will be working on early next year once we get past this year. But yes, it is on the list.
all right, excellent. Well, if no one has anything, I'll move it.
Okay, no more questions from anybody on the board or the board professionals? Okay, so the motion was moved by Mr. De Palma. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Pink.
And just to be clear, that motion is for application 42-2021P.
Yes, I apologize.
Roll call.
Mr. De Palma,
Yes.
Mr. Renner,
Yes.
Mr. Lauer,
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz,
Yes.
Mr. Lenning,
Yes.
Mr. Pink,
Yes.
Chairman Marucci,
Yes,
Mr. Garcia.
Yes.
The next one, 44-2021P.
yes, 44-2021P. And we'll move that to vote. Do I have a motion?
I'll move it.
By Mr. De Palma. And
I'll
a
second it.
by
I'll
Mr.
second
Pink.
Mr. De Palma,
Yes.
Mr. Renner,
Yes.
Mr. Lauer,
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz,
Yes.
Mr. Lenning,
Yes.
Mr. Pink,
Yes.
Chairman Marucci,
Yes,
Mr. Garcia.
Yes.
okay, and we
Next
move,
application 45-2021P.
yes. Okay, do I have a motion?
I got that too, Dean. I'll
Mr.
move
De
it.
Palma's on a roll.
Second
And a
by
second. A second by Mr. Renner.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. De Palma,
Yes.
Mr. Renner,
Yes.
Mr. Lauer,
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz,
Yes.
Mr. Lenning,
Yes.
Mr. Pink,
Yes.
Chairman Marucci,
Yes.
Mr. Garcia.
Yes.
Okay, now, before we move on to the applications, I'd like to kindly ask whoever's not speaking to put their microphones on mute because I'm getting some background noise. I don't know if anybody else is hearing it. Okay, thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to the first application of the evening, which is 01-2021P, and it's Bright Point Housing LLC and Esquire Amanda Curley.
Mr. Chair, this application is being carried again, or being requested to be carried again. They, based on that last, they started the application before the board, and there was a number of questions and revisions that they wanted to make to the plans. Unfortunately, they were not able to have it completed in time for this meeting. So they've asked to have that carried so that they can address all the comments from the board and the board's professionals and have those plans resubmitted and continue their public hearing at a later date. We don't know exactly when that is at this point, but they will have to renotice either way. So they will be renoticing for when they do come back from the board.
Okay, and we put that to vote, correct?
Yes, typically we do. It's not a legal requirement, but we have, that's our practice before this board.
Okay, Mr. De Palma,
Yes.
you gonna move this one?
Yep, I'll move it. Let's just make it 4 for 4.
Okay, moved by Mr. De Palma. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
By Mr. Pink. Thank you, guys.
All right, Vina, we need a roll call.
Mr. De Palma,
Yes.
Mr. Renner,
Yes.
Mr. Lauer,
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt,
Yes.
Mr. Lenning,
Yes.
Mr. Pink,
Yes.
Chairman Marucci,
Yes.
Mr. Garcia.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to the next and the final application of the evening. It is 03-2020P, and it's Regency Centers Acquisition LLC, and Mr. Pape.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, board members, board professionals. My name is Kenneth Pape with the firm of Heilbrunn Pape. I have the responsibility and the privilege of representing your applicant this evening, Regency Centers. This is an application for amended preliminary and final approval of Phase 1 and an amended preliminary approval, Phase 2 of the project that was previously approved by this board in 2005. Before we begin a substantive presentation, I would ask if the record would reflect receipt of our notices and confirmation that the board has jurisdiction to hear the application this evening.
Mr. Sordillo, do you have any info on that?
I have no objections. The board does have jurisdiction. Notice was provided by the applicant. As
Thank
required
you.
by law.
Mr. Sordillo, thank you for that.
And Mr. Pape, sorry, I just wanted to make one quick note. As we discussed earlier, we don't have a live court reporter here this evening for this application. The applicant will be getting a transcript made from the recordings of this application and this presentation. So just so the board's aware, if we can try our best, and I know we always do, but it's always sometimes difficult to talk over each other and possibly identify ourselves when we speak, just so it'd be easier to have that transcript made at a later time. I know it's usually we have it done at the time, so it's a little bit easier, but we have a lot on our agenda in the next month, so we didn't want to lose a date, that we have already everyone here for a hearing. So we want to proceed, but we want to just make sure that we keep our, our comments and everything, try not to talk over each other, try to be respectful so that we can create a good transcript so that the court reporter can then transcribe that.
Okay, very good. And I think it's important, the point you made, for everybody to identify themselves when they speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Sordillo.
I just want to add one more thing, Ken, before you start. I want to let the board know that I've notified the TV studios. So if for some reason the recording stops or the YouTube live streaming, there's an issue with the YouTube live streaming, we will stop the meeting temporarily till we get everything straightened up. Just because we need to have these we need to get the transcripts done based on the YouTube video and the recording.
Okay, now Vina, is there a a shut-off time like there is when we're live, like a 10 p.m. Shut-off time for the recording?
No, typically we stop at 10:30, so
Okay.
we just
But it-
stick to that. But it's not like when you are in the courtroom. I don't.
Okay.
believe so.
Okay, excellent. Okay, thank you.
And for the record, Mr. Chairman and Ms. Sawant and Mr. Sedillo, our court reporter will pick up the YouTube recording tomorrow morning. We will have this transcript complete and in your hands by the close of business on Friday, so that those members who are not here this evening, as well as all of the professionals and the members who are, will have that transcript for the follow-up hearing that has been scheduled for next Tuesday. So I thank you for the accommodation, and our court reporter will pick up everything tomorrow morning.
Okay, thank you.
And to Vina and to Joe and to Chairman, may I begin a substantive presentation?
Absolutely, sir.
Okay, thank you. This is an application for a regional shopping center. This is an application that began in 1995 with a general development plan that included residential and commercial. It progressed through the approval process. It had some litigation some 15, 16 years ago, and an approval for a regional shopping center was approved. We're here tonight to request an amendment to that approval. It is our goal to honor all the commitments that have been made to the township with this center, to bring bring ShopRite across the street to the center, to bring a national retailer, and to create a high-end commercial center that Old Bridge will be proud of. Your applicant is Regency Centers Acquisition. They're a national company. They're a national company that builds and holds. They are a company that prides itself in operating shopping centers. They own and operate 402 shopping centers in the United States. They own and operate 5 in New Jersey, 2 that are close by in Metuchen, downtown Metuchen, and in Bridgewater, Chimney Rock. But they have a significant presence here. And in the Northeast, New York, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, that area, there's a total of over 30 centers. They have a very significant presence in our area. And this is a project that we started working with the town more than 2 years ago. And we had an application filed. We were working with Mr. Darji, Ms. Shapiro, Ms. Sawant, and all of your guide, all of your professionals, and in fact had achieved an application in early 2020 that was complete and just about ready to come before the board when COVID-19 intervened. And when COVID-19 intervened, everything stopped. Retail stopped. But Regency had made a commitment to the town. And the commitment that was made was they were going to make this center work. And it required doing considerable research, national research of what retail was working and what retail was not working. They were able to modify the tenant base and to create a viable development plan that works. And you still have the big box, and you still have the grocery store, and there's still the pads. There's some other tenants that have been changed. There is a major medical tenant that has been brought in. But what I wanted the board to be aware of is that Regency has made this commitment and has stayed true to their commitment to deliver this project to the town. The presentation of the application will be made through 4 professionals. There are also representatives of the company that are here. Mr. Chris Widmeyer, who is the Senior Vice President of the company, he's in charge of new development. He is with us this evening. Rebecca Wing, who is the Senior Investment Manager in charge of ground up development, and to whom we have all reported. She is the day-to-day leader from Regency on this, is also on the line with us this evening. The professionals who will present the application to you are Keith Cahill, the professional engineer from Bowler, responsible for the preparation of the plans. He will take us through the existing conditions. He'll do an overview of the proposed development, and we'll spend some time going through details of the design. We have with us Frankie Campione, who is the architect responsible for the very beautiful buildings that have been designed. I'm going to ask that he assist in presenting the buildings to you, including the signage that is on those buildings. There's some unique signage that is proposed, and he'll present it to you. Henry Ney is our traffic expert. He is will be the third witness. And the fourth witness, and I do not anticipate that we will reach the fourth witness this evening, is Allison Coffin, our professional planner, who will address the variance relief that's associated with some of the project development plans. With that as an opening statement, and with your permission, Mr. Chair, I would ask if we could introduce to you Keith Cahill, have Mr. Cahill sworn. We'll share with you his credentials, ask that you accept him, and go right into our substantive presentation.
Absolutely. Welcome, Mr. Cahill.
Thank you.
Mr. Cahill, would you please raise your right hand? Do you swear that the testimony that you give this evening is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And could you please state your name and spell it for the record?
Certainly. Keith Cahill, Cahill, with the firm of Bowler Engineering located at 30 Independence Boulevard in Warren, New Jersey.
Mr. Cahill, would you take a few moments to place on the record your education and professional background?
Certainly. I have a civil engineering degree from Rutgers University. I have a master's degree in civil engineering from Stevens Institute of Technology. I am a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey and have testified throughout the state in excess of 100 different municipalities and have been accepted as professional witness in civil engineering. I've testified in front of this board in the past, both the zoning and the planning board, for multiple applications. My current position at Bowler Engineering is a principal. I've been there for 24 years, overseeing the design of the plans similar to what you see tonight in terms of site plan documents.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Cahill.
And for the record, Chairman, is Mr. Cahill's credentials acceptable to testify as an expert in his field of engineering?
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you so much.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Cahill, I think if you could begin by just identifying exhibits that upon which you will rely, and if Mr. Cahill and Ms. Sawant could have if we could have an understanding of screen control.
Yep, I'm going to share my screen right now. And hopefully somebody can give me a thumbs up that you see it.
We do see an aerial exhibit.
Perfect. So I'll use this to give an overall background of the location of the site. This is labeled aerial exhibits prepared by Bowler Engineering. This aerial is dated 9/9/21. It's an aerial photography from NJ Jin of June 2020. For the record, I'll point that north is to the top of the page, and we've highlighted the site in yellow, and I'll give you some benchmarks here. Along our eastern property line, you see Route 9 running in the north-south direction. Our site is split by Schulmeister Road, which, as you can see in this aerial, is under construction. I think the construction is much further along now as it's been developed. And that is what I'll call the northern edge of our property, what we call phase one. Phase one is to the south of Schulmeister, and phase two is to the north of Schulmeister. The south end of the property is bordered by Jake Brown Road, as you can see along this side. You may be familiar in terms of surrounding uses. To the south is also the Board of Education facility where they have buses and different office buildings down there. In regards to the north, currently there's a easement for a major overhead power lines and further lands to vacant to the north. To the west is, as it appears, vacant land, but is part of the prior approvals that Mr. Pape mentioned in terms of, and also referred to as the Oaks development. It's a residential development. As I mentioned, the site currently, you can see some road improvements, but they haven't really come out of the ground with any residential product in that sense. To the east of our site is Route 9. and some additional vacant lands further to the east. Just in general, if I zoomed in a little bit there, you can see the site is currently vacant. It's treed with mostly evergreen trees. Just to give you some characteristics of the site itself, the portion that we're calling phase 1 is known as block 7101, lot 1, and it's 48.55 acres. This piece of property has approximately 2,200 linear feet of frontage along Route 9. 2,200 linear feet of frontage, close to a half a mile. We have approximately 1,500 feet of frontage along Schulmeister Road. And farther to the south, there's actually lands owned by the Board of Ed that buffer Route Jake Brown Road, but we have an access easement through that land to allow access out to Jake Brown Road. That frontage along Jake Brown Road there is approximately 250 feet. You may be familiar with, there's a jug handle at Jake Brown Road, as well as a jug handle at Schulmeister Road. And the last piece of information I'll provide to you is that we do have wetlands that have been delineated on site. We have a current LOI as of December 2020. So we're in current standings with that. The pockets of wetlands, the major portion is up near the intersection of Route 9 and Schulmeister Road, which we do not intend to touch. We're just staying out of their buffer area. There's another pocket right along Route 9, again, not touching. And then there's a portion down by Jake Brown Road, which has been determined to be isolated wetlands. And we have an application into the DEP for a GP6 to fill those wetlands. We have received notice back from the DEP that we have been approved for our stormwater management design in accordance with their state standards. The actual permit for the GP6 is still pending. We expect to actually receive the physical paper the beginning of 2022. Along this, I want to mention one other thing that's important. This site has 3 existing drainage areas that land. So when it rains, water falls in 3 different areas. One area, approximately in 10 acres, rolls towards the wetlands, towards the intersection of Schulmeister and Route 9. Another portion rolls towards the west, which is actually back towards the Oaks property. And the reason I'm explaining this is when I get to my proposed stormwater management system, you'll understand why we have detention basins where they are. The last drainage area is really this nub, the bottom, the southern portion of the site, and that flows due south towards the Jake Brown Route 9 jug handle there. In general, I call this site relatively flat because it's so large. There's only anywhere between 2 and 2.5% average grade. There are areas that are steeper, but in general, it's relatively flat. But as I mentioned, the size of this property being 48.5 acres and the size and scale of those dimensions, 10 to 15 foot grade changes over large distance is why it's flat. So I hope that gives you a good idea of what the site looks like. And Ken, I forgot to mention, I described the exhibit. I'm assuming we'll mark this A1.
With permission, Counselor, may we mark the aerial exhibit as A1?
Yes, I think that's appropriate. We'll go through each number, A1 through how many exhibits that you present, and we'll start with A1.
Then,
Fantastic.
if we were physically present, we would say A1 marked November 30th, 2021, if the record so reflects. Mr. Cahill, I think that was you've located the property and identified our surrounding uses. Could we go to the overall site plan and do an executive overview of the proposed development?
Absolutely. And just as I get into this, I just want to let you know your professionals have looked at our drawings. We've had an enormous amount of cooperation in terms of communication back and forth, and they have generated review letters that we've had chance to review and have some dialogue back and forth. So my presentation, I hope to pick up some of those sound bites. It is a lengthy letter. This is a very large project, but I really am not concerned with any of the comments being too significant that'll have drastic changes to what is in front of this board this evening. And just along those notes, I want to point out on the DEP side, we also have an NJDOT permit that was executed way back when. The improvements related to Schulmeister Road, a right-in, right-out driveway along Route 9, the jug handles along Schulmeister's have been constructed. So not only do we have the permit, but we also actually have constructed the improvements for this development that we're a part of. As I mentioned, the overall approval of Oaks is a part of that. In addition to that, Middlesex County, we have filed an application. It's pending. We got news today. They just need a check and they're going to issue their permit, which is great news. And in line with the soil erosion, Freehold Soil Erosion Conservation District, we have their permit in hand. And lastly, in terms of the Old Bridge MUA, we have sent our drawings in and we have preliminary intensive approvals for both water and sewer as part of this project. And as you may know, we have to go through the final approval. Hopefully the site plan proceeds through approval and we would obtain and request our final approval from them. So not only have we carried this project through a significant design effort, it's been reviewed by multiple agencies with significant amount of comments and back and forth, and collaborated on providing the best design for Old Bridge Township that works for, in our view, the proposed uses on site, and fits in line with the prior approvals of what was as mentioned, the GDP, a site plan approved back in 2005. And now we've modernized it to what works today post-COVID. With all that being said, this exhibit I'm going to mark as A2 is entitled the overall phase 1 and 2 site plan, sheet 103. So it's the exact drawing that's in your site plan package. It's just been colorized for enhancement for testimony tonight. It's dated 10/1/21. Now I confused you on the view of this because I rotated it 90 degrees and now north is to the right of the drawing. Route 9 is along the bottom of our site, heading in the north-south direction. Schulmeister splits phase 1 and 2, again, running top to bottom, east to west. And Jake Brown Road, again, farthest to the south of our site, along the left-hand side of the southern edge of our property. Fundamentally, in just high-level discussion, the lighter color blue is our phase 2. You may notice we really haven't done anything different than what was previously approved. We've left that original design, and really it would be only asked for preliminary approval in conjunction with what we're asking for preliminary and final, because as part of this application and the changes we've made, we are going to be reducing the total square footage of this site down from 600,000 square feet, which was previously approved in 2005, down to 510,000 square feet. And that balance is what we're going to discuss is phase 1 for Regency, and it's the colorized area. I think some high-level stuff here. Again, as I mentioned, you can see some dark green areas up near the intersection of Schulmeister and Route 9, and another larger area right near a right-in, right-out driveway through the wetlands I've described previously. Again, further to the south, where our connection road of Portaluca out to Jake Brown Road, we have some wetlands areas that have been isolated. We will be obtaining the GP to fill those to have that roadway connection. Couple other key points here in terms of the access that's proposed for this site. As mentioned, coming off of Schulmeister, there's 3 full movement access drives that were again located similar to what was done before. You will notice Portaluca that connects into the Oaks development comes through our phase 2 in the same alignment that was previously approved. We've kept that intersection of Portaluca and Schulmeister continues. If you head south, Portaluca continues down to Jake Brown Road. That road is a private road. It's in an easement dedicated to the township. However, Regency will be owning and maintaining that road. The township is not responsible for it. They just have access to it, and the public has general access to that. You will notice that that is one of the access points into our development off of Schulmeister. I'm going to get into the description. We have two, I'll call anchors for the center. We have a retail facility we call Building B, which is located to the south side of Building A, which is a grocery anchor ShopRite. Those buildings, in terms of size, the ShopRite is 80,475 square feet. The big box retail is 134,280 square feet. You will notice the driveway, and I'll just start zooming in a little bit so you can see better. Give me a second here because it's going to be a second to adjust. I think this gives you a little bit better. Hopefully you can see better. Portaluca is the first access as you head west on Schulmeister. There's a access point again with a designated left turn lanes along here to enter into the site in front of the two larger grocery and retail facilities. And then closest, I'll say, or furthest to the west, we've maintained connection into the site where our trucks and delivery vehicles and employees would utilize to the rear of the facility. This is key, and you'll notice the alignment. Just like Portaluca alignment, there's a road A that was previously approved that has access and was required to have access in phase 2. We've had to maintain that access across to have a safe intersection. So this is where we have our driveway to come in and circulate to the back of the building for deliveries. In regards, and I'll move to the east and around the site to the south. As Mr. Pape mentioned earlier, we have brought some new uses into this development. Besides this retail, we have where my cursor is, we'll call Building K, which is a 72,000 square foot, 3-story square foot building for medical office. And the developer for that is Rendina. They have developed numerous medical office buildings, or another client of ours throughout New Jersey. They do a fantastic job in providing medical office facilities for the general public. You can see that as well, surrounded by parking fields. We have Building L, which is, I'll call a pad site, shown as a single tenant with a drive-through use. As I move further to the south, we have Building J and a canopy. This is a convenience with gas use. It's a 5,075 square foot convenience store with parking surrounding it and a overhead canopy with 8 fueling facilities, 8 pumps, 16 fueling positions, 3 underground storage tanks. As I continue further south on the site, you can see the site gets subdivided by our right-in, right-out access off of Route 9, again in the exact same location as previously approved. This change in gray shows what is constructed if you went out to the site today, and we've continued that road through into the site. When we look further to the south of this entrance into the site, we have an area where we have essentially our shops area. 3 proposed retail buildings that have multi-tenants. They're 14,250 square feet each. Each of these 5 to 6 tenants in them. You'll see they've been creating, and the architect has done a great job to work with us to create a nice space in between the buildings with outdoor seating, anticipated to have potential restaurants in here, but really creating a very nice space and area. And when he shows his elevations, I think you'll be super impressed with the type and professionalism of these buildings. As Mr. Pape mentioned, Regency operates 400 of these facilities throughout the country, and they really do a fantastic job with what I'll call, this is like almost an outdoor mall or retail area that provides interconnection through each of the uses and has the ability to have nice space outside for their customers to sit outside. The 4 buildings up along the Route 9 frontage pad sites anticipated to be 5,000 square feet each. Buildings F, G, H, and I. Each of them have 2 tenants in them. And you'll notice on the north side of each of their buildings, we have anticipated a drive-through. In the land use industry, COVID has shown anything but relaxation towards drive-throughs. The amount of uses and operations going to drive-throughs has significantly increased. Parking demands have gone down. Drive-through uses have gone up. Services to be delivered out to your car has gone up, and I'll go into some of that as well. But this is a high level, is the proposal, is the types of different mixed uses throughout the site in terms of the shopping facilities, the grocer, the medical office building, again, the retail pad or the potential drive-through pads for fast food, retail buildings, and shops and areas, and the convenience with fuel. I want to point out too, as a very high level, in terms of this, I think that covers the overall access that hasn't changed. And I'll just pan down. You can see that the site does connect into Jake Brown Road. You'll see down in here, we have a easement that allows access across to Jake Brown Road. That property there is actually a piece of the Board of Ed property, which we've had permission to do so for this project. Couple other key components. In terms of site circulation, we've spent a significant amount of time planning this out to anticipate the different types of uses, allowing the cuts in the roadway to provide appropriate two-way circulation aisles in front of the stores, where they vary in up to 30 feet in width. In the parking stalls, we typically have 24 or 25-foot two-way drive aisles. In front of the building B, we actually have drive aisles of 27 feet wide in this area. In regards to the office building, typical 24-foot wide two-way drive aisles around the facility. In terms of the convenience with gas, the drive aisles there, I'm sure you've seen and experienced in Old Bridge Township facilities like this. They have drive aisles of 35 to 39 feet to allow proper circulation around a canopy, the deliveries that come in for the fuel, as well as the store, which is, again, a little bit wider drive aisles, but totally appropriate for the use relative to the fueling canopy. As we move further south into the shops area, again, we're back into 24-foot wide two-way drive aisles. I will point out the only locations where we have one-way circulation is in and around the pad sites where we have drive-through uses. Obviously, to maintain safe circulation, having the proper area to pick up from the driver's side of the car, we have one way around those in a counterclockwise direction, including building L as well. You will notice we have bypass lanes for those, again, just so that if there's a queue, we could go around them. So again, I think very appropriate, thought out design for circulation for the vehicles. The other one-way drive aisle I will note is that right off of the right-in, off of Route 9, where my cursor is, we have a one-way drive aisle that circulates into the site and gets, I'll say, a direct access back to our medical office building. That is the primary reason for that. Multiple reasons, good design thought. If you put everybody up through here, you're just adding more traffic in the intersection of Portaluca and this right-in, right-out driveway. We have an access way that cuts between the fueling facility and the canopy. We want to minimize the number of cars that are going to that building K, by providing that access point. Because at times, and as everybody knows, you get your car filled up, you may walk over to the building as you're getting your car fueled. We want to minimize a significant amount of traffic through there. What I will now mention in terms of circulation is the thought out process for the pedestrian circulation. This is a mixed use retail facility with office complex. We want people to, especially after over 1,000 units can be built immediately to our west, provide great circulation for pedestrians to come down along Schulmeister Road, be able to access our grocery or our retail building B, continue through the site, as you can see, along sidewalks that could connect. Again, you'll notice connection from A and B with large sidewalks in grass islands with crosswalks on Portaluca. That's raised crosswalks as calming devices with signage and stopping for pedestrians to get across. So you can envision an office environment that would want to get to the grocery store potentially to eat, get to the convenience store, or obviously get continued across to our shops or other potential fast food. We have a direct access point across our parking lot that heads due south from Building K across the convenience with gas. We have sidewalks crossing again along and circulating into the front of the site from and behind our shop buildings, raised crosswalks again. There's been some additional comments from your professionals that, again, I think had great ideas of adding some more sidewalks, a couple more calming devices for crosswalks. We've had crosswalks, again, connecting the buildings C, D, and E down to the pad sites of F, G, and H, adding some raised crosswalks there for calming devices, which we agree with as well. So our intent here, again, is to create an environment that's inviting and circulates safely and efficiently for cars, as well as pedestrians for the multiple of mixed uses. In regards to a couple other key components that may be lost, because it does factor into some of the variances that we would be requesting. You'll notice, and I discussed our stormwater management and our drainage before, the big green areas water runs to now. We're going to allow a little bit to go there, but we have two main stormwater management features. We have a basin number 1 down by Jake Brown Road, which is a infiltration sand basin. This provides, again, has been reviewed by the DEP, has been reviewed by their professionals, meets the DEP's requirements for providing water quality for the entire site, as well as meeting its recharge component. You'll also notice to the rear or to the west of our grocer and Building B retailer, we have another large stormwater detention basin. This is hydraulically connected to Basin 1. And as I mentioned before, and is important to the overall design, is that there's water that continues in the southwest direction. And we've had to place a basin here and balance what water discharges out of this basin, which goes through an easement in the lot to our west or part of Oaks. As you know, there was the same common ownership. They provided a storm pipe easement for us. We have a 1,300 linear foot pipe that goes out to an existing head wall and discharges in that direction. The DEP loved this. The professionals love this because those improvements had already been constructed. There are existing head walls. There was already disturbance and permits obtained for the wetlands. We are tying into that discharge point and maintaining and minimizing any impact to environmentally sensitive areas to the west. At the same token, we've created the most efficient opportunity for stormwater management design by balancing the water where it goes before and after, meeting all the regulations. I also want to point out, as this change, and you may not have seen the plan that was submitted in 2020, what Ken mentioned earlier, but this plan has significant improvements to what I'll say the residential buffer to the west. If you recall the prior approval from 1995 or 2005, I mentioned Road A. It continued right along the property line of the residents in the rear. It was 10 feet off the property line. 75 or 56 feet later was the buildings. So within 56 feet, a 2-story commercial building was sitting next to the residence. And if you look at this now, we've added over 2.5 acres of green space separation from the residence. That is a tremendous improvement from the overall operations. Yes, we have to have a service area in the back where our trucks unload and unload. We've created a buffer area of plantings, of evergreens along this entire frontage. The average distance all along here now is in excess of 150 feet, and the closest building is 200 feet from that property line. Tremendous improvement from what was previously shown, what was contemplated, and really separates the commercial from the retail, from the residential. I will point out, and you will see right up at our driveway location, yes, we are still 10 feet away. And we still have a variance relative, or excuse me, a waiver relative to buffer. It's a waiver because our driveway location having to line up with roadway A has to be there. And we have provided some screening. Your professionals asked for more landscaping there. We will absolutely do that. But the point being is now you have a 30-foot section. Up to 50, it starts shading away that you're close. And the balance of that distance is buffered in excess of 150 feet. So tremendous improvement on the overall layout. I will also point out now going into the overall for parking, as we contemplated through this and what was previously approved, there's a combination of parking provided between 5 per thousand and 4 per thousand for the office use. When we came into this and submitted our plans, we truly thought we were coming in variance free on parking because we provided in excess of 5 per thousand for all of the uses, including the building K and the office use. And again, this is medical office. We have, again, provided in addition, fully compliant parking relative to ADA. We are requesting a variance for size of parking. The ordinance that we're under from 1983 requires 10 by 20. 9 by 18s are more standard. We do provide 45 parking stalls immediately in front of building A that are 10 by 20s. We also have 10 by 20s immediately around building J, which is the convenience store, high turnover area. But we truly feel the offset of efficiency and size of parking that works today to reduce the impervious coverage of this site and development in excess of 5% from what was previously approved, 2.5 acres of decrease of impervious coverage. Tremendous improvement there, but we are requesting the variance for the size of the parking stall. And along with that are a couple others we'll get into later, but to give you that idea. I mentioned, I thought we were coming in variance free relative to parking, and your professionals properly pointed out that the use of the office building is a medical office building and it has a higher standard, and the drive-through operations characterizing it as a fast food has a higher generator. And I'll get back to parking, but it did generate a variance, and I'll get into that in a little bit more detail after I finish going through the balance of the overview of all the other improvements. Again, included in our parking count for this site, which in total we have 1,868 parking stalls in our phase one. Again, it's in excess of 5 per thousand. We are including 22 electrical charging stations. They're highlighted in multiple locations throughout the site. I'll just circle a few of them. There's some out by the retail facility, the major retail box. We have a couple by the office building, over by the convenience store, as rounding out, and a few down to our south. Again, 22 electrical charging stations there. Other components typical that you find in our major retail boxes in the shop, the ShopRite, we have cart corrals provided. We also point out the ADA stalls immediately adjacent, and you'll notice some odd striping out in front of building B. This is geared towards a standard of customer pickup of product, where they may order something online, they pull into a parking stall and the number, they text the store, I'm here, and they say, please park in spot 5. They park in 5, and their product is brought out to their car. Again, 2020, not envisioned, not needed. Today, required, and is part of the design in all shopping centers, and going back through many to provide that amenity to the customers using the facility, which again is good design practice. I think in terms of, I hit the stormwater management, I hit the grading in general, the proposed, we're going to be collecting all of the stormwater through pipe system, discharging into the basins as mentioned, meeting the NJDP requirements for reductions, reducing the 210 and 100-year storm by the required amounts, the 50 to 75 and 80%. We are meeting the water quality standards with our infiltration basin, and we are meeting the recharge amounts with our infiltration basin. So stormwater, positive, significant improvement, especially since we've decreased impervious coverage as well. In regards to the balance of the utilities, this site, we have looped utilities for the sanitary. I'm sure as part of the overall Oaks approval, there is a significant improvement that's out to our west. There's an existing manhole in Schulmeister that anticipated this development. We're tying into that. And as I mentioned, we have approvals. Water in the same token, we have a loop system in and around the buildings. We have hydrants shown. I got a letter from your fire professional official. We'll definitely be meeting with him and going through every comment that he has to ensure he's satisfied with hydrant locations, fire lanes, and the circulation of the truck where he wants it. So that will be occurring as well between now and their next meeting on the 7th. And then in regards to just electric and gas, again, obviously everything along Route 9, plenty of services, and we're looping and providing services to each of our buildings. I think the next component I want to hit on is landscaping. In terms of landscaping, we are clearing the site. It was treed. I will note there are, what I'll say, though it's not drastic grade changes to make the roadway alignments work between Jake Brown and Schulmeister, staying out of the buffers for Portaluca, for the existing environmentally sensitive areas, and meeting the required square footage of this retail facility. At a minimum, it has to be 510,000 square feet. We've had to clear and grade as shown. Unfortunately, only along the perimeters and the limited areas and around the wetlands area can we save much, but we had to. We'll work through with your forester and our tree replacement obligations to be in compliance with what they're looking for there. But again, we're very limited on what we can do other than in the environmentally sensitive areas for preservation. In terms of landscaping, I mentioned we've created a buffer along the residence to the west. We've also had shade trees thrown along our roadways to provide appearances. And just to give you some numbers of what the proposed landscaping is, we have proposed 264 shade trees, 7 different species, 51 different ornamental trees, 3 different species, 178 evergreens, mostly along that buffer area, 4 different species, deciduous shrubs, 436, 5 different species, evergreen shrubs, 1,743 throughout our site, along our parking lots, where our parking's heading into areas, 1,180 ground cover plant material throughout our site, 3 different species, perennials, 1,810 throughout the site, and 212 ornamental grasses to fill in and replace what we have. I want to point out these detention basins have certain maintenance requirements and it becomes hard. We do have some slopes going along them, but with all that said, we're proposing 5,874 new landscape plant materials throughout this site. 5,874, 34 different species, including trees, shrubs, and plants throughout the site. I think we've done a very tasteful job. We do have some waivers that your professionals have pointed out. I will point out due to spatial areas up along along Schulmeister, again, along the 10-foot area, right, or the stretch right at our driveway, created waivers. They were previously granted or as at least contemplated because we did not get any closer to Schulmeister. We did not get any closer to the residents. We're only getting further. So the waivers associated with that, again, we're going to be respectfully requesting that. Your professional as landscape architect has provided numerous comments. I intend to meet with my landscape architect, with them. They can talk shop and work through the things that make sense. Many comments in terms of species type and some variety, we'll work through it. What I do want to highlight is to make this site functional, we need to have great visibility to Route 9. We have environmentally sensitive areas that limit what we can do. We are elevated above the road. It doesn't make sense to bring a significant retail facility like this and then screen it from the roadway. We have 3 main points of access off of Schulmeister, which is north of the site. So you have to know you're going there. You don't know the center shows up yet. And then you see, hey, what is this? I need to be able to see into the site. We're minimizing planting along Route 9. It makes perfect sense for this facility. There are some, again, comments about that. And this is the area where I really want to maintain fantastic visibility. I roll into my next item, which is signage. Signage, and I want to focus on the freestanding signage. And I will say, Vina, your planner, has done an unbelievable job evaluating all of our proposed signage and giving us very good direction in terms of what made sense, where to locate it, how much, how little, sizes, things to that nature. Again, 2,200 linear feet along Route 9. If you look at how many sites you could have in there with 200 feet of frontage, you do the math, you could have 11 to 12, 15 freestanding signs. On this facility, we're locating 3 freestanding signs that'll be monument signs. Sign one is directly in front of or to the east of building L. That sign, it is 30 feet in height and 367 square feet and set off the roadway appropriate amount there in terms of in excess of 20 feet per your ordinance. Sign number 2 is the what was defined as a gas sign. And again, it's what I'll say immediately out in front of our convenience and gas use. This is considered a separate sign allowed for this use. This sign is 15 feet 6 inches high. It is defined as a monument sign because it does have a base, and the area there is 167 square feet. In regards to a third sign, again, appropriately located, again, to guess, just at the entrance of the right in, right out, right? So you see your sign as you're heading south. We're looking at line of the sites, what's cut off by the trees that are along Route 9, providing about 450 linear feet of visibility to our first sign. We then have another pocket of trees, but we have enough room to see that the secondary sign for the gas. And then our last secondary sign is down by the turnoff for Jake Brown Road. Again, this is the same size as mentioned as the secondary sign for gas. So again, it's 15'6", monument style sign, setback 20 feet, and 167 square feet. The last 2 monument signs are located along Schulmeister. Because we are a corner lot, we are allowed to have a primary sign and a secondary sign, a second sign. So we have one at the intersection of Portaluca. This primary sign, or this sign, again, is in the same character, materials, and look as the other signs, in the same height, the 15'6", and the same area as the secondary signs, 167 square feet. The sign, the third sign, the second sign on Schulmeister is right just prior or to the east of the entrance in front of the ShopRite. That sign, again, is the same size as those other secondary signs. The only delta here on this one is that it isn't set back 20 feet from the roadway. It's set back about 13. And that's because it's in an island that is smaller than what we have that's down by Portaluca. So again, it's not any closer. The feel for it would be fine. And I think it provides visibility to the traveling public to access the site in the appropriate locations so that our circulation operates safely and efficiently. With all that being said, I think the only other thing I haven't mentioned is lighting. In terms of lighting, in terms of overall requirements, we only have one deviation, and that's for spacing of light poles. The maximum height of our light poles is 30 feet, and you have a criteria to be about 4 times the height, which is 120 feet. Due to the location of islands, due to what makes sense in terms of spacing of lights, due to the fact that we have better lights today, these are all LED lights, 4000K temperature, much more efficient, laid out in a more efficient manner, but we deviate from that criteria. It provides adequate and safe lighting throughout the site. We do have lower lights of 18 feet high along Portaluca rather than the super high ones. We also have some building mounted lights around the different buildings. We also have lights under the canopy. Again, no design waivers for the lighting in terms of spilling over the property or anything to that nature. The only one is the spacing of the actual poles. And we feel we've done a fantastic job in terms of efficiency, minimizing, also using LED to minimize the energy to properly light or safely light these parking lots and these uses. I want to point out now and kind of circle back, and Ken, I got to go through operations. So I wanted to hit that, but if you want, I could hit a couple easier, lighter items.
What I would like to do, just for a moment, Keith, I mean, I hope all see the organization and the efficiency that went into your presentation to the board. There was a lot of work that went into making that presentation so cohesive. But I'd like to just make a couple of points. On the grading and on the stormwater management, you pointed out that you have 3 different drainage areas and that you've designed systems that are compliant with the town and state requirements. I think we should also emphasize these are privately owned and maintained and create no burden on the township of Old Bridge. So
that is correct.
And with regard to the landscaping plan, you took us through the landscaping elements and pointed out where the landscaping exists. Landscaping serves a number of functions. It buffers and filters in appropriate locations. It creates an aesthetic attraction in others. And in some places, it's used just to block the view of certain elements, like a trash enclosure that's not a feature. All of those are present here. If you could just confirm, your team has used landscaping for all those purposes.
That is correct.
And there's a number of comments, and you addressed them once, but there are a number of landscaping comments. I would like to confirm that we've read through those landscaping comments. We understand those landscaping comments. There's some size, there's some species, there's some location changes. You're generally comfortable with those recommendations that are in the staff's report?
Yes, and I would just encourage, and I think our professional landscape architect will speak to the landscape architect who provided the comments, and at least provide some context on some of the whys. And then some of those items may be that we don't need to make a change, but I would encourage the fact that those items aren't significant in change. We can iron that out with your professionals. We could have even more detailed items at the next hearing for anything that we would say that we've agreed not to comply with on this item type of thing. But other than that, Ken, I really do believe there's minor things that we can address.
Okay. And if we could, you went through very efficiently and quickly all the approvals that you and your team have worked on, approvals and permits. I think what we should point out is all the necessary approvals and permits are either in hand or well underway. That the DOT approvals are in place and the DOT improvements are in place. Check the box, DOT.
Correct.
The DEP wetland delineations are in place. You have one permit that's outstanding. You're actively engaged in that and have, as recently as this week, been told that that permit is been approved and it's coming out. That would then conclude our DEP wetland approval package, correct?
Correct.
We have the OBMUA. We've been working with them now for 2 years. Preliminary water, preliminary sewer, tentative water, tentative sewer in place. And final approval requires a site plan from this board. And that's the only approval that remains outstanding for water and sewer, correct?
That is correct.
And now if we could, so, and Freehold Soil Conservation District, kind of a mundane one, but very important. You've got that certification in your possession.
In hand.
And the Middlesex County Planning Board, with whom we have been working for almost as long as we've been working with Old Bridge, has indicated that they're ready to issue their approval. I think we have a financial obligation to them to satisfy. And if you could just confirm, Keith, that's all the approvals and permits that are required. So we don't come to this planning board with an idea. We come to the planning board with a well-designed and approved plan. We want the board to know that all of those ancillary approvals and permits were pursued before we came to the board with this presentation.
That is correct.
Okay. I think that we're going to need to spend a little bit of time on a little bit more on parking. You pointed out the adequacy of the parking, and you also pointed out that there's variance relief. I think although Henry Ney will come with considerable more depth on the presentation, I think it's important to point out how the parking standards have changed over the past 15 plus years, but that the ITE standards, which seem to be more current and more real, were applied in the staff's analysis. I would ask if you could comment on that, and if you could join with them in say your opinion that the ITE standards are the appropriate standards for the board to be considering this evening.
Certainly. And I'll tell you, in regards to that, if you refer to page 12, item 3 from the your professionals review letter, there's probably a page and a half, almost 2 pages of information on this, if not more. And the key there, as I mentioned, following the prior approval of 5 per 1,000, that's what we came in with. The concern of the use of a medical office building needing a higher demand of 1 space per 150 square feet generated a higher number of parking stalls. And what I'll say again, a fast food use, half of these buildings up along Route 9 in terms of square footage would be designated as a tenant as fast food. The criteria from the ordinance of 1983 was 1 space for 30 square feet, which is, with all due respect, an archaic evaluation today when it comes to what percentage of people go through drive-throughs for fast food versus using it. I have probably testified in excess of 100 different major fast food restaurants, knowing their operations, how their business becomes 70 to 75% through drive-throughs, as well as other fast food uses that if this is qualified, and their parking demand drops significantly. COVID has only driven that number even higher. So it really doesn't make sense too much to go by those criteria. And I say that, and your professionals accurately pointed it out. And now, instead of being a surplus of 60 some spaces, we have a deficit as recorded by your ordinance by 400 spaces. I say that tongue in cheek because when I look at the uses, what isn't considered is multiple aspects. This is a mixed use development. Items and the peaks of different uses happen at different times. There's shared parking that occurs. The uses themselves have different ratios of use in terms of spaces for that use, where ITE, the NJD, the ITE is the standard for doing that. And I think when you look at, and I agree with your professionals, how they've done their evaluation, you now came up with, or they came up with 1,870 spaces required. And as I mentioned before, we're providing 1,868 spaces, a gap of only 2 spots. So, and that doesn't really, I will say, get into much of shared parking when I look at medical office building, when that would be peaking versus other items of retail. You know, it's just very different. And this, I call it more of a lifestyle fitness, a center, and the shops and how they walk from one place to the other. You're not having as many cars driving from one spot to the other over a facility like this. So it makes perfect sense that from an operational standpoint, we are not concerned with this number. The major tenants that our client Regency is signing on is not concerned with the parking ratios we're providing to them. The individuals that have the most to lose if we don't have enough parking is bad circulation. People don't want to go to the shopping center. It becomes unsafe. You have accidents, whatever it may be, liability, and a poor operating facility. Who loses the most? It's not going to back up out onto the highways. The site is too large. It would be internal. Our client has the most to lose and has the most to risk. They operate 400 of these facilities. They look at this and say, this is what we just done down in Raleigh, North Carolina. It works great. We do not have a problem. We have a mix of uses very similar. We have a roadway network in terms of that very similar. We have lack of, what I'll say, a view maybe of loading zones because they know where their retailers in the shops area, how they operate. Things like that, they are, in my opinion, experts because they own and operate. They're not building a shopping center and flipping it and selling it to somebody else. They're acquiring or they're developing and they're owning and they're operating. And they would clearly not want to design something that would put them at risk of not having a successful center. So with all that said, I truly believe we are providing the appropriate amount of parking. We're providing a ratio that is, I'll say, typical to this to the industry as an overall development. And when you look at the ITE, we're in line with those numbers. And I think if you read page 14 of your professionals letter, I think they said it for me. So I'm hoping that makes sense to board members and to others who are listening.
So Keith, a lot said. The parking works from our client's perspective. Our clients are experts in this operation. From your perspective, it works. But I think the strongest words are the professionals guiding the planning board have also pointed out that they join with us in the calculation. 1,870 versus 1,868, close enough for government work. I think we're there. I'm going to ask if you could a little bit more, staying on the parking lot. If you're ready, can we talk about the loading scheme and,
Yes.
and our clients' expertise and the guidance that they've given us in their loading scheme?
Certainly. So I'm going to start with, and actually, Ken, I think I'm going to hit the basic operational information and hit the loading all at the same time. So
I like it. Thank you.
Buildings A and B, a grocer and a retail facility, couple things. Both of them, on average, employ approximately 120 people to operate total. Not there one time, 120 total employees. Typically between 30 and 50 employees per shift, where their busiest time, holidays, certain things for grocery stores that may float up to the 50. It go down to 30. I often use 40 as the number, and doing testimony for numerous national retailers and grocers. That's what I've been provided by them in terms of employees per shift. The hours of operation for the grocer, 7 days a week, 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. They often have maintenance of employees overnight, stocking shelves, whatever it may be, cleaning up, prepping for the next day. So potentially employees inside the building, not shoppers, but employees potentially in there around the clock. The retail box, similar to this, similar in terms of hours, 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. I mentioned the number of employees about the same. In terms of deliveries, you'll see we spent a lot of time laying this out, and I'll zoom in a little bit further here. How this operates. You can see we have turn lanes to allow our trucks to come into the back. This gray area is a concrete turnaround. Our intention is to have all of our trucks delivering to buildings A and B, come in off of Schulmeister, enter our driveway closest to the west, circulate here, load, unload, exit the same driveway back to Route 9. There's no need to go anywhere else. I will say, under redundancy, you will notice we have designed larger radii in our parking lot in an area that could get us out to Route 9 through our right in, right out driveway. It's our intention that it's redundant, period, end of story. If there is a problem or something wrong with Portaluca for whatever reason, and you have tractor trailers coming to these that are on a schedule, you have a backup plan. But the operations is going to take it off of Schulmeister into the back of the site, back to Schulmeister, back to Route 9, traffic signal controlled, a perfect scenario with turn lanes available. The numbers of trucks, in terms of the grocery, throwing all of the grocery, the frozen, and other vehicles that would use the loading areas back there, up to 38 per day that could possibly be back there. You'll notice we have 6 loading zones in the back, spreading that over the time. Again, not a concern with the numbers. And adding to the 5 loading spaces in the back of building B, a retail facility typically has less because the grocery store has a higher number. At most on the retail side, again, not just the large trucks. There's also smaller trucks that may come in and out of the back, 18 per day. And I spread that over the hours of operations of where that is, and even some outside of those hours of operations. Not a concern. The amount of time that each of those loading zones, again, these facilities operate, these facilities all over, they know what they need to operate a safe and efficient operation. And we've accommodated it here. In regards to trash, there's trash in the back as well. For the compactors, picked up typically 2 to 3 times a day. There's balers for the cardboard for the bigger retail.
Two to three times.
Oh, I'm sorry, a week.
Thank you.
Sorry. So all of that operation is back there, pulled away from the residents, using an in and out system that works. It has a backup plan if necessary. I think it operates very well as proposed. In terms of the operations of the medical office building, building K, hours of operation there, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday. They sometimes go into a Saturday, Sunday, 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. with less people and appointments. Typically on their peak during the week, 150 employees, and they have a turnover of visitors where they could see up to about 70 to 70 people, or 70 in a 2-hour window over a course of their hours of operation. People visiting here, a high percentage of them are scheduled in terms of appointments. If you do all that math and having over 370 odd spaces in this area, there's no concern in terms of having the employees there, having an overlap of 70 plus 70, we still have a surplus. So again, I think that works very well. I will admit I did a very poor job showing the service area for this building, and I take full blame for that. The pads along the west side of the building, there's 3 things there. This building does need an emergency generator. It has trash collection. It has a generator, or excuse me, a transformer, and it has a service area. What you don't see on this exhibit well, and I'll try to zoom in a little bit more, is that I put grass in this colored exhibit and didn't show a depressed curb in the area in front. Again, I'm pointing to the area Here, mistake on my part, we have access out to these parking stalls. What I've learned is that there's 3 parking stalls immediately in front for their maintenance, facilities maintenance operators. Trash pickup is outside of the public hours in terms of when they're operating, and those parking stalls will be vacated when, in terms of the employees, when trash is scheduled, again, 2, sometimes 3 times a week at most. And what is not shown as well is a screen wall that would match the materials of the building itself for the trash enclosure, as well as the generator and the transformer. This is their service area. It acts as their delivery area if they have it, for anything for the building. The deliveries for the building itself, and you may be familiar with office buildings, they may get 10 to 20 deliveries a day for a facility like this, but it's all box trucks. They'll be coming in and out of the front door. Medical office buildings, they may have lab samples and things to that going in and out. Again, they efficiently operate that, pick that up internal to the building with a pickup and drop off. Again, in terms of the operations of this, Rendina has developed this type of facility throughout the state, numerous in operations. What we're providing, they are satisfied, except my grass that's hiding their trash enclosure. So I will fix that, and that will operate safely and efficiently. You can see the ADA stalls as well that are compliant. And I'll just say that as a blanket compliance for each of those. I believe that covers the operational aspects of the medical office building. Focusing on J. J, as I mentioned, is a convenience with fuel. I've probably testified to in excess of 100 of these things throughout my 24-year career. They get deliveries for the canopy, or excuse me, for the fuel. WB50 vehicles come into this. As I mentioned, the drive aisles are more than adequate. We have a right-in, right-out driveway immediately off of Route 9. We're anticipating pulling in, circulating around at a minimum of once a day for the fuel. They will offload on the right-hand side. The dimensions in terms of the spacing between the islands, 30 feet, the dispensers, 30 feet. All of that operates. You have clear lines for cars to operate. And when the tractor trailer is fueling, it does not inhibit the operations at all. Adequate safe distances between the canopy and the store itself. Again, cars being able to pull out no problem. The delivery vehicles that go for a facility like this in the rear, masonry enclosure in the back, you have a dumpster, a shed, which houses equipment that keeps the yard clean, as well as a compactor. You'll see the loading zones on either side. Smaller vehicles can come in off the right side to pick up stuff out of the compactor or the trash. On the left side or south side, that loading zone is adequate enough. This is a 24-foot drive aisle, 15-foot lane for the loading. Again, store deliveries in this between the soda and the milk and the dairy stuff that the typical grocery stuff coming in and out of there, 1 to 2 per day for the store itself. Up to 15 a week is what I've been told. They also take anywhere to 24 in a daily period, in a week's period of time, 5 days a week, coming in and out of the front of the store, smaller box trucks and things to that nature. Again, no concern with this dimensions. It's industry standard at this point for this type of operation. No concerns with loading, no concerns with trash. Number of employees typical. You could have up to 10, including a couple out front. They're going to hire somewhere around 40 people. Again, for that, you'll have obviously employees out at the dispensers serving the fuel, inside the store, serving customers inside. Hours of operation there typically 24/7. Moving further to the south, again, I'm going to refer to this as the shops area. And I didn't mention the building signage purposely, because the architect's going to go through these buildings and really show that. Operationally, what you'll look here, and your professionals have pointed out, is that there is no additional loading zones. And the back of house of a building that's along these buildings is truly front yards to streets. Portaluca is going to be carrying traffic. Route 9 right there. We are dressing up the rears of these buildings. I'll focus on building C, D, and E, the shops buildings. Everyone asks, why not add another loading zone in the back? And I'll tell you why. We don't have to. I'd rather have a nice grass area, a nice place, a place that can be walked through. It's going to have, when you see the signage, a mural back there. It's not going to be ugly. If you want to make it ugly, we can do something back there. Or you can trust us to say our vehicles that are typically single unit 40 vehicles will be entering in off of Route 9, circulating to the front. Again, these aren't 24-hour uses. They're bringing store deliveries right in the front door. Some of them are taking them in on small vans and parking stalls. Others are going to queue up along the front off peak hours. If the stores aren't open, what are we worried about? Why do we want to add more asphalt? Why do we want to make it look ugly from the road? This operation is understood from somebody who operates 400 of these locations, 30 in the Northeast, and knows what works and what doesn't work. So we have those loading. They can circulate in this parking lot, no problem. Again, circulating back out to Portaluca, back to Schulmeister to the traffic signal, or they can continue back to 9 and continue south. Either way, they're coming back to a traffic signal on Portaluca, and they circulate right through our parking lot without a problem. I'll focus on loading for the pad sites, F, G, H, I. I mentioned we have bypass lanes. And somebody asked, well, how, it could be you take a delivery, where are you going to take it? Again, typically not 24-hour uses. Definitely for the retailer portion of it is not. Some of those retail deliveries will come and they may queue up in the front, or they're going to most likely for these buildings utilize the back area. There is a bypass lane, and it typically is not done during the peak of drive-throughs. I've testified in excess of 100 McDonald's. How many loading zones do McDonald's have? Only when forced by towns. They do it because they know how to operate. They don't add more impervious. They bring it in when there's not peak. They want to sell. They don't want to take a delivery when they're selling. So they have a business motivation to do it in off-peak hours. We can circulate single unit 40 vehicles around these buildings without any problem. And remember, it's happening off-peak hours when this is not full of cars. They can easily circulate down any of these aisles, come into our lane, and exit out, again, through the different sites without a problem. And then lastly, I want to bring up for these in terms of employees, typically in here, you're in retailers needing no more than 2 to 5 people in that store. In terms of the fast food, if it's fast food, again, 5 to 10 employees, depending on the time of day, and typically not being driving to the site themselves, these types of employees. Any case, my comment here is the area, the shops area has provided sufficient drive aisles, parking numbers, circulation for the uses and for their delivery vehicles that will be operating during off-peak hours. Regency knows this. They have the most to lose if it doesn't operate, and they can point to numerous facilities that show that. And they're trying to provide a more aesthetically pleasing facility in Old Bridge in areas that these buildings, there's 4 sides to these buildings. It's not the back going to be a masonry wall, and the architect will do a great job showing that. The last part of this is trash enclosures. We have shown them. We can circulate again through this site. I've had a lot of concern that from your professionals, we have 2 within the parking lot. Can they fit? Can trucks get there? Absolutely, because they can circulate through when there's no cars there. They're not picking up trash. They're picking up trash typically before 7 a.m. The parking lot's empty. It's not a concern. The aesthetic part, we've added landscaping, and I want to pull up another exhibit that they provided to me to give you an idea. This isn't a board-on-board fence. This isn't a chain link fence. This is something that they and their tenants aren't afraid to have immediately out in front of their building. It operates well. It's a pleasantly, aesthetically pleasing, and they do not have a concern doing this, and they've shown it elsewhere. I'm going to hopefully do this right. Ken, can you confirm you see that?
Yes,
Okay. So this is in the Raleigh facility in the parking lot, landscaping around it. You can see it's made of brick material and the doors are closed with a metal closure. They're only opened when the trash truck comes. Why is that? Because they've built into them man doors that allow access, typically in the rear, that won't have a problem when operating and doesn't allow to be seen. Look at the height in excess of 8 feet. I did not have this detail shown on my site plans. I apologize to your professionals and the board. I will make sure this detail is shown, but this is how Regency and our office feels we've planned this development out in a way that will function and be aesthetically pleasing, serving the needs of its tenants, its customers, and Old Bridge.
Excuse me, just for record keeping purposes, we'll mark both of those pictures as Exhibit A3. I think we can mark, instead of those, make sense to mark those together.
Thank you.
okay. Keith, I think that we're coming to a conclusion of a portion of your testimony. I think that I'd like to just do, you described the variance relief that's required for parking and variance relief for the freestanding signs. You did not provide planner's testimony in support of those variances. You identified them empirically, and you indicated from an engineer's perspective why you felt that they were appropriate. But I wanted to say to all the board members and to the board professionals, Mr. Cahill's responsibility with regard to variances is to describe them accurately, to put the empirical data before you, to share his engineer's perspective. But we recognize that there's planning testimony that goes with that, and that will come at a later hour. I'm going to look to you, Mr. Cahill. Have we reached the point where it's appropriate to indicate that we have the reports and that you're familiar with the reports and that you're prepared to address those comments? Or is there any further direct substantive testimony that you would like to place on the record before we go there?
To the point that you mentioned, I need to point out the variances. And again, just as what has been identified in the reports, which I agree with, in addition to the parking space number, there is a requirement to have an island when 20 plus stalls are in a row. We do have a few areas in the parking field, I'm pointing to a couple of them, where we exceed that. We are respectively requesting that variance. The islands, again, that were size of the islands, because if you recall, I'm proposing 9 by 18 stalls. The ordinance requires 10, to accommodate a 10 by 20 stall, so the length has to be longer. They need 19 feet and 38 feet. Because my parking stalls are smaller, my islands are shorter. So that's another technical variance that is associated with the parking space size. There's a requirement to have a 5-foot radius on all of curbing. And there are some islands throughout the parking lots because of the circuitous angles and locations that they do deviate under. Again, in my opinion, I'm just pointing them out. I'm not concerned from a safety standpoint or a design standpoint. It functions well. I'm not creating tripping hazards. I'm just trying to provide islands that may be in an area when you have some unique shapes to those islands due to the angles that are there. And lastly, for the loading requirements, you do have a requirement to have it for each building. You just heard me. I hope it wasn't a rant, but I realized that when I was speaking a long time, I probably was ranting. Building C, D, and E technically do not have loading zones where 2 would be required per building. F, G, H, and I did not stripe one either, though they have one that will operate and function like one. I do need a variance in that area because I'm not meeting the number per that building. It was put located that it was commented in the letter that the convenience with gas didn't have a loading zone, but I believe it does. It meets the ordinance, so does not require one. Building K, again, I'm going to reserve the rights to, when I correct the drawing, if it meets the definition with your professionals, for it to be a loading zone, but there is a service area that meets the needs of that building. So if it's determined it's a variance, again, I will respectfully request that. And then again, building L. They can, I believe, identified all of the variances that were requested between parking numbers. I identified, I believe, also the signage variances related to the freestanding monument ID signs. I reserve the right that your architect will discuss the building signage. God bless him. And he can spend, they're beautiful, but there's a lot of it to discuss. I think that covers the items as required, because the waivers I mentioned for landscaping, I believe I mentioned them all, and our planner will provide the justifications for each one of those.
Keith, I'm looking at what you and I prepared over the last couple of days, and I believe that we have gone through that. I'd like now, if you could confirm that you said it once, but I think we owe thanks to the board's professionals, and to acknowledge how much time that they have spent with us. It's an inordinate amount of time. And there have been long and in-depth discussions with them, and there have been responses generated by your office. And in the last week, there's comprehensive reports that have come out that we have continued to review with them. And there were a couple of categories in those reports. When a project of this size is going to have pages of comments, a lot of those comments we talked about with the staff, and I'm going to hope that they join with us a little bit later. The professional staff and join with us a little bit later, but the details on grading comments, the details on drainage comments, the details on stormwater comments, and the details on profiles, and the details on utilities. Can you categorically advise this board and the professionals you understand their requirement, you can and you will address their requirements?
Agreed to all of what you just said. We can address all of those comments related to grading, stormwater, drainage. I'll add utilities, profiles, basin comments, nothing on soil erosion. And I discussed landscape and lighting already. And I believe I addressed all of their comments with circulation, except for a couple we have on our list to discuss further. So categorically, all of those comments in all of those sections of their letter, we can iron out with the professionals without concerns or significant changes to the design documents that are in front of this board. And I do echo Ken's comment. There's 91 sheets of this package, and my wife thinks I speak to the town's professionals more than her sometimes now. So I appreciate all their assistance in making sure we understand what's going on and trying to appease or to address their comments.
And that, Mr. Chair and board members, is the conclusion of Mr. Cahill's direct testimony. We're prepared to go to our next witness. We're prepared to defer to the chair as to examination by board members and board professionals at this time. I defer to you as to how you wish to handle the bringing on the next witness or examining Mr. Cahill.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cahill. Vina, do we have any professional questions and comments for Mr. Cahill?
Yes, I do. Actually, Keith, can we go through the memo very quickly? We could skip signage for the architect, but that way Rakesh and I can get answers to the questions, because this is a combined memo. So board members, this has been a combined effort on Rakesh's team's side and me. So usually you see two separate memos for planning and engineering, but in this case, it's a combined review memo. I think if we quickly go over comments, then we will address questions that have not been addressed. If something needs to be resolved at a future date, then we could just mention that. And that way the board knows that, because this is an elaborate memo, it's a 30-page memo. I want the board to be comfortable that most of the comments in here have been addressed.
Okay, and if I may, if we're done with this exhibit, can we
Stop sharing.
stop sharing? Yes.
Yep.
Actually,
Thank you.
I would, if Chairman Marucci, you don't have a problem, I would prefer to have the site plan on so that it's easier for me and Rakesh to direct our questions to specific areas.
Okay, I'm sorry. Sure.
In terms of, Keith, you want to take the lead with signage, since we're skipping it? I just want to let the board know that, I mean, I've said it numerous times with various applications, our current signage ordinance is outdated. Now, this application was based on the 1983 ordinance, and 1983 ordinance is no different. So whether it's the 1983 signage section or the current signage section, we really need to work on it. I started working on it, but then it has been very busy. So I will be getting back to it, but needless to say, neither the 1983 ordinance nor the current one really contemplates a development this size. So the signage ordinance that was written is meant for smaller commercial developments within the township. In terms of freestanding sign, although the applicant is proposing additional signs, these are signs that are warranted because I think they are required for site identification purposes. Typically, I've seen that majority of the towns that have an elaborate signage ordinance say that if you have X amount of frontage, then you could have an additional sign. Unfortunately, our ordinance does not allow that. In this case, the site has enormous frontage on Route 9 as well as on Shoemeister. And I don't think the ask is huge when it comes to freestanding signs. The sign areas or the sign of the height of the signs is consistent with what is existing along the corridor. So although you might see numerous variances sought tonight on signage, most of them are because this is a unique development, and the older ordinance did not really envision a project this scale. So I do have questions on certain, and I'm sure the architect will answer. And those questions are more pertaining, or I'm sure the board would have the same questions like murals. Why do we have so many murals and stuff like that? And I'm pretty certain the architect will have a justification for that. So having said that, we can actually skip the signage section and move on to the other site issues or questions, concerns, which Rakesh and I have brought up.
The next sections was the variances and waivers. I hope I provided testimony in support of them for our planner and for what you were looking for. So would we start on page
with
15.
The waivers? I'm sorry to interrupt. With the waivers, I just want to chime in one thing. I would like to work with you with the landscaping, the landscape plan or the landscape architect, because I think there are certain areas where we can improvise or add some more landscaping. I would recommend that should the board act favorably on the application, as always, one of the condition would be that the applicant would work with us to kind of finalize or fine tune rather the landscape plan.
I'm in agreement of that.
We're, yes, on the applicant, on speaking for the applicant and with authority, we are too.
Okay, Vina, anything else regarding this portion of the testimony?
Keith, I think we were going to move on after the
Yeah.
waivers, right? General comments.
Yeah, it's general comments, and I think we've provided the compliance part on 16, and I'm just gonna hit the ones that I think, again, that may want confirmation. Item 17 on the electric charging vehicles, we are proposing 22. We were in and time of application prior to the state's and Old Bridges, which has a little bit different criteria, but we are in the spirit meeting what you were looking to do, but we were in prior to those ordinances. So I'd like confirmation that there's no variance required or waiver required from Old Bridge, because it may not be applicable to our project, but we are doing and meeting the spirit of it. And similar comment on the states that we're not out of order, and that's item 17 on electric vehicles.
I would like to.
Excuse me, if I may just jump in real quick on this one point, because this is Joe Sordillo, by the way. This has come up on other boards I represent and other applications that has come up as to with regard to the new state law and the model ordinance, which technically is supposed to take effect whether or not the actual municipality adopts it or not. It actually is imposing upon applications. The one thing we've discussed regarding this is, you know, the board, the planning board, or the township itself may not have ability to waive or grant variances from any requirement of the state under this ordinance. What we've done in other applications and other boards is simply state that you know, if it's in compliance with our current ordinance that are applicable to the project, that's fine, you know, that's separate. But with regard to the recently adopted state legislation, you know, we just state that the applicant will apply, you know, has to comply with any required laws imposed upon the state level. There is no waiving or requirements other than on the township level or the planning board level, other than what the state would impose, whether that statute does apply or not. Because there's kind of a gray area here with regard to this new model ordinance, the new legislation as to when it applies, you know, does the time of application rule does apply to it or not. So simply put, what we've done in other circumstances, and I think could apply here, is simply state that the applicant will comply if it is applicable to them, in any ways it is applicable to this development, and if not, then it will just comply with the applicable state, township ordinances. And that's, turn it back over to Vina to respond.
So, Joe, actually, my question was to you. One, I was just calculating while Keith was presenting, the township's ordinance is kind of consistent with the state statute. In fact, Old Bridge Township was at the forefront. We adopted the ordinance way before the statute was adopted. But what I would ask you is, I mean, both ways, if you try to calculate based on our ordinance, we require every 25 spaces, one electric charging station, and the state model ordinance says 4%. So it's essentially, it's the same thing. But there was one additional thing which the township's ordinance requires, is that 5% of the parking spaces, there be electric conduits. So, which means that in future, 10 years down the line, if more and more people start using electric cars, then there is infrastructure in place to add additional electric charging station. And I would, that is one thing I would emphasize, or something Regency needs to consider, is to have that infrastructure in place at least, so that in future, if they need to add more spaces, they could do so. Clearly, the township's ordinance would not apply, because I believe the township adopted its ordinance spring of 2020, whereas the application was filed in front of the planning board January of 2020. With the state statute, I would ask you to take a lead on the interpretation, and you've already mentioned what you indicate. But I do want to see more electric charging infrastructure in at the location.
Vina, on behalf of the applicant, running conduit for future EV charging stations is not objectionable. We'll work with you as to where it should be.
Thank you. Keith, I think you can move on to the next.
Okay, do we want to have any questions from the board members themselves regarding this testimony?
I think Rakesh has to chime in still.
As far as the engineering, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I was getting some feedback.
There's some background noise coming from somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay, I think you're clear to go.
All right.
Okay.
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. From an engineering perspective, I think Mr. Cahill covered most of the engineering items. A lot of them are very detailed and technical in nature, and we have discussed them with the applicant and their professionals, and they've agreed to comply or work with us to revise the plans to provide the details that we requested. So I don't have anything to add right now with regard to any of the technical items. The EV charging, Vina just covered that as far as that goes. The state, and I agree with Mr. Sardillo, that's how we've handled it other boards as well, as far as the state legislation goes. For this site, it would be 75 make-ready parking spaces is what the applicant would be required to construct for phase 1 of this commercial development. As far as the there is a
Rakesh, I'm sorry, to be clear then, what's shown on our plans we intend to construct, and then we have to have conduit in the ground for that number of up to 75.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, actually the current legislation doesn't require you to actually construct the EV spaces. It requires you to have 4% make ready spaces for a commercial development. If it was mixed use, you'd be required to construct some EV, but right now it's just 4% make ready. We like the fact, and we thank you for proposing the 22 charging stations that you are proposing, and we'll need another 53 make ready basically to comply with the state legislation.
Now, is there a design element to that quote unquote make ready, the rough-in for the 75 spaces? How do you install conduit? I'm assuming. How do you protect it? How is it kept? You know, if it's not in use for 5 years, let's say.
That's a great question, Mr. Chairman. As far as this board goes, there's really nothing other than the applicant designating that they're going to have a certain spaces be make ready. When it comes to the actual construction, that'll be the code official's job to make sure that the conduits are of the right type, size, and protected properly and all that. And that'll have to be done in accordance with the electrical subcode.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Yep. One of the questions that we had in our letter, and I'm sort of skipping through, one of the questions we had in our letter is Keith, if you can zoom out a little bit, there's a square shaped property that currently is noted as belonging to Village Supermarkets, which is a future commercial site. And what we requested is that the access to that site be dealt with or accommodated in some way, or at least some discussion be had as far as how the applicant proposes to integrate that site into this development.
Sure, great. Yeah, and that comment was in here and it's on my list, Ken, that I didn't hit. So, yeah, I think the challenge that we have, providing cross access between the sites is not a concern of our client. Locating it today without knowing what's going on that property is tough to do. There's obviously grade change today. There's access points that may make more sense. So could we cover it with, we agree to provide cross-access easement when we see what is being developed next door? Or somehow, I'll let the lawyers figure that one out, but I don't want to say right here, we're going to put 15, 20 foot, and then whatever goes on the other side, it makes no sense to put it there, right? So.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. And I can also appreciate kicking it to the lawyers too. So really I guess what we would be looking for, and again, I'll ask Vina for her input as well. What we would be looking for is should the board act favorably on this application, that there be a condition that the applicant would work with the future developer of that property to integrate that site in with this development. What we don't want is for some sort of awkward kind of development to happen. I'm sure that the applicant doesn't want that either. They want, they want it to be cohesive, integrated development, so it can only be more of a benefit to this development as well. So that's all we can really ask for, I think, at this point, knowing that that site for that, the design for that site is obviously not even centralized at this point.
Is that site landlocked currently?
It has an access easement, Mr. Chairman, so it can get access off of Jake Brown Road.
Jake Brown, okay.
But ideally, a site like that would want access through this development from Route 9.
Sure, okay, thank you.
Yep. And Keith, let me know if I'm missing some stuff. Again, I'm just sort of skimming through our review letter.
Rakesh, since
Yes.
you're skimming through and you're in that area, Joe, can you give board the background on comment 19, which is the condition of the developer's agreement, so that the board knows that we are still working on it?
Yes, this is Joe Sordillo. With regard to it, I spoke to Vina about this this afternoon. I haven't been able to speak with the township attorney or the applicant's attorney yet on this, Mr. Pape. But there is a condition 20 of the developer's agreement that requires that there be a commuter parking lot in connection with any approval, amended approval for this development. We're working as to finding potential alternative resolutions for this requirement, as the commuter lot may not be being able to be built or wanted to be built in this development, as we can see it through the presentation this evening. So we're going to have work with, because it's something that has to be worked with through the township, not necessarily the board. So we're going to be working with the township and the applicant to try to come up with ways to address condition 20 and hopefully have a response or some type of proposal to present to the board by the next hearing date.
Mr. Pape, you're muted. Ken, you're muted.
Yes, there. I thought that I might have been the reason for the feedback, so I went mute. So yes, we're aware that that language appears in the developer's agreement. The language is there's some qualifying elements that are in the actual developer's agreement. I had the opportunity today to talk with the township attorney and Vina about alternative ways of addressing that. Did not have an opportunity to reach a conclusion other than to make a commitment that during the next week we'll engage in dialogue with the township to see if we can come up with something that's mutually agreeable. I think that would be the appropriate place to stop this evening. We're going to work very hard to make it work, to make an alternative work.
Thank you. So along that same vein, there is one of the things that we did talk about in our discussions with the applicant and their professionals was there is an existing New Jersey Transit bus stop at the corner of Schulmeister and Route 9. And one of the things that we're asking is that as part of this application, the applicant work to basically construct a sidewalk going out to that bus stop that would serve this development and is also get folks who may be walking down Schulmeister to the bus stop as well.
So we do want to cooperate. We more than want to cooperate. We can't make promises on lands that we do not own or control, but we can make promises to provide the funding for sidewalk, and where we can install it, we'll install it. We like the idea just as much as you do. We just have to work it out. So we're in agreement that sidewalk would be beneficial in that area. We just have the legal issues, ownership issues that we've got to work out.
So I think we can, and correct me if I'm speaking out of turn, but I think that's something that maybe we can discuss between now and the next meeting as well to get a little bit more clarity on how
Yep.
What that's going to look like.
Yep. Nope. We're fine with that.
Okay.
Rakesh and Veena, you had mentioned, and I think I put some testimony, I hope it's clear, on additional sidewalk to get across from Building K, the medical office building, towards and connecting the pad sites F, G, H, and I.
Correct.
And you also mentioned some calming devices for crosswalks that are in that parking lot and using a treatment for calming device of the intersection off of the right in, right out off of Route 9 prior to getting up to Portaluca. We're in agreement of that. And in the same vein, you asked having some bike racks located throughout the site. Again, they're easy things that make sense to do. So again, I want to do that. We did point out we didn't want that sidewalk coming along that one-way road. I think we all agreed with that on how we got there. So we do it in the safest location to cross the street. So I just want to make sure we're all on the same page with that, and I can have an exhibit prior to the next meeting to show that if needed. And I did, and Veena, I forgot to mention one other thing that you brought up, and it does relate to signage, because you pointed out to me that on the drive-through uses, when we show drive-through ordering points and the directional signs, I thought they were covered under directional signs and no variance would ever be required. You mentioned that it could require a variance, and I wanted to let you know prior to the next meeting, I want to show that, so that if it does add, in your opinion, a variance, I want to ask for it rather than finding out down the road that it is. And lastly, in the same vein, you mentioned we did not show any signage on the fueling canopy. And I want to add that too. If it does require a variance, then I want to ask for that. But I know right now it's not shown. And again, I would show you that prior to the next meeting, so you have time to review it, determine it, and let that be known to the board if you're in agreement with it or not.
Sure. Just to add on to that, board members, there was a lot of discussion between Keith, Rakesh, and myself about pedestrian circulation within the site. And we had asked the applicant to add additional sidewalks, especially, I believe, the connectivity between the parking lot for the medical office to the retail spaces is quintessential, because medical office buildings typically would close at 5 o'clock or may not be open on weekends. Now, when we talk about shared parking, and we didn't even get into the whole shared parking concept, but every user or every retail use has a different peak time. So when retail is mostly the parking spaces within a retail complex is mostly used during evening time. That is their peak time, whereas the medical office building is closed at that time. So the parking that is required by the medical office kind of frees up during evening hours. So if the restaurants or the fast food restaurants get busier or the retail development gets busier, people will be able to park where the medical office building is. And so it's quite important that there is safe pedestrian connection between these uses. And Keith has agreed to look into the design and add sidewalks where possible, and he will work with Rakesh and myself to finalize those. The other important factor was, Keith, can you zoom out a little bit? So the overall development, the entire Oaks development is a mixed-use development with residential and commercial. Residential being on the rear portion.
Sorry.
So that's okay.
Sorry, I'm going the wrong way.
That's okay. So I think it's important that there is proper connectivity, and it's a multimodal connectivity. It's not just pedestrians, but even with people during summertime, I would love to bike to the retail store. I would love to bike to the restaurant. So I had discussed that maybe that's something they should look at. And between today and the next meeting, Keith has agreed to work with Rakesh and me to find solutions as to how we can add that connectivity. They have agreed to add bike racks at multiple locations throughout the development. So those are changes you will notice. With fast food drive-through restaurants, I have come across that majority of the township's ordinance do not cover menu board signs. And typically when a fast food restaurant comes in, they have to request a variance for those menu board signs. So I had asked Keith to look at some of the fast food restaurants and what their requirements would be in terms of menu board signs and ask those variances at this point. Obviously, he needs some more time to research, evaluate, and come up with a proposal. We will work with him, review those signage in advance of the next meeting, and so that the necessary variances can be added. Also, some of the fast food restaurants also have logos or symbols above the clearance bar site, or some of those directional signs which otherwise don't need variance. But when you place a logo on these directional signs, then it is counted as a sign, and that would trigger a new variance. So some more research to be done on the applicant side, especially when it comes to signage for the gas station, for the fast food drive-through restaurants. And hopefully before the next meeting, we will have that information, and I will have a chance to review it. Keith, you can go on.
Is there anything else that
Yeah,
stuck out?
Rakesh, do you have anything else?
I don't have anything else at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, anything from any of the other board professionals before I hand it over to the board members?
We
Mr.
do
Chairman,
have the fire chief tonight, and we have our forester as well.
and in addition, I also, Alex Meitzler from Traffic Planning and Design, who's our traffic consultant, is also online. So I'll ask Alex if he has anything to add at this time.
Okay, in regard to Mr. Cahill's testimony.
Yes,
And what we've
yes,
been,
yes.
before we
Yes.
move on. Okay,
The applicant's traffic and consultant's also going to testify, and I imagine Alex will have some input at that time as well, but just with related to the on-site circulation items.
No, Rakesh, I think you and Vina already hit the items that we had discussed earlier this week in regards to Mr. Cahill's testimony.
Great, thank you.
Okay, any other board professionals regarding Mr. Cahill's testimony? If not, I will hand it over to any questions from the board members themselves. Okay, do we have any questions from the board members? Mr. Renner?
Yes, sir, I do, Mr. Chairman. I have an observation relative to the traffic flow by buildings F through I. So if permitted, I'd like to see if Mr. Cahill can zoom in and I can discuss my observation.
Absolutely, thank you.
So Mr. Cahill, if you zoom in, first we'll focus on the entry in and out from 9 with the intent that you drive in from 9. You go in and then you would make the left, right? Follow that pathway down or continue straight down. Then you'd make the left at the end and you turn towards building F, all right? If we go towards building G and zoom in so we can see the relationship of building G, the entrance to the drive-through, and the relationship to the adjacent parking directly across from it. So from an observation standpoint, it appears to me that if there was a 20-foot adjustment of taking the cluster of building F through I and moving those 4 structures south 20 feet, you would then have the ability to directly align with the interconnecting pathway between the parking. What's occurring right now is if you drive down off of 9, you come in, you make the left. You go to any one, if say for example, you want to go to building G, you would follow down, you turn down, you'd make a left down that parking stall lane. And then to be able to enter, if you took that path, you'd have to make an odd move to get into that entrance for the drive-through. But if you could envision adjusting it 20 feet south, it would directly align and it would reduce odd maneuvers for vehicles when they enter or exit. I know the intent is when they exit any of these facilities, they would make the right and follow the pathway, make the left, and then make another right to exit back onto 9. But the likeliness is that will not occur. And they'll try to get into that second lane to then make the right and leave. So the observation is potentially, if you envisioned, unless there's something that's prohibiting you to make the adjustment 20 feet to the south for the entire cluster, I think that it would be something that you may want to look into. That's one.
If I may,
Second item is,
Mr. Renner, can I just address that really quick? I just have a quick question
Yes,
to
sir.
bring up a point. But is that traffic pattern discouraging people from driving between those parking lanes and possibly creating accidents with people backing out? Is it encouraging people to loop around specifically to get to those fast food restaurants?
well, I think it, and that's where the whole discussion comes from right now. What is the likeliness to occur? The likeliness is anyone that's going, let's say, to building G or building H, for example, they are going to be more tended to drive straight out, if possible, and then make the right in front of, say, it appears to be building D, and then make the right to get back on time in lieu of going around the outside. So it may be as designed for the traffic flow to circulate around the perimeter, but it appears it's more likely that the vehicles will try to go straight. And if, right now, they can't go straight, because if they try to go straight, they're going to hit the barrier for the parking stalls. So more than likely, they'll make a slight move and go into an oncoming traffic lane to enter the drive-through. So food for thought.
Your thoughts on that, Mr. Cahill?
I do, and it's a great question, and it's one that we've looked at from our design element multiple ways. Couple things that you'll see, the alignments aren't exactly perfect in terms of the widths across the islands. And, you know, what really needs to happen is to make sure that we have the connectivity across, and having those sidewalks kind of throws off some of that alignment. It's a challenge. I hear the comment that you can slide one, it may help the entrance, but the exit may not always line up. I will comment on a drive-through window. The exiting movement is a controlled timing. You don't have cars queuing back to back to back because they're taking care of a transaction. So that movement comes out in a timed fashion and less likely. So it's less of a concern on the exit movement because it's not as, I'll say, a rapid movement. On the other side of things, it unfortunately, just sliding south may feel easy. What you don't see here is the grade change that's along the left side here. And we have an obligation, and one of the comments your engineer made, and I haven't shown yet, is the access into our basin. I need to maintain area here to allow that to happen. So I can't slide it fast. I could look at, and again, I can look at if I do something with these islands in between to help align slightly better and see if I can alleviate that and minimize it. Again, the fact that it's stop controlled in either direction coming down those lanes and or leaving the drive-throughs, I think helps mitigate that.
Yeah.
Perhaps, Mr. Cahill, during the week.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Okay, and
No,
Mr. Pape, did you have a comment?
when you're a traffic expert and no traffic expert, and Mr. Cahill can take Mr. Renner's thoughts and figure out the best response. I think that's the best answer that we can give to. So we appreciate the comment. We'll let the professionals go to work on it.
Okay, Mr. Renner, you said you had other questions?
No, well, the observation, that was the first part. The second part was after I envisioning, and it's coming from just a planning experience standpoint and how to avoid potential impact. So after I envisioned the adjustment 20 feet to the south, when I look at building G right now, the exit for the drive-through almost aligns, if you were to adjust it 20 feet to the south, to that common walkway. If you could envision that for building G, in lieu of that being the exit for the drive-through, it would be the entrance for the drive-through for that particular building. Now there, when a vehicle's coming down off of the main entrance and they make a left, they can essentially drive straight into building G drive-through. That slight adjustment for building G and it would work for building G, that would align perfectly, and it would also help building I. Right now, the entrance for building I is actually in the opposite flow of traffic lane if you're coming directly at it. But by adjusting down the 20 feet, it would directly line straight up with the oncoming traffic going through that parking area. So I think I've made the observation clear, just something for the design team to consider. And believe me, I've overthought the traffic flow pattern, but in my mind, the greater impact is the likeliness that someone's going to cross that lane no matter what to get into that position. That's what will occur, although it's not intended from the driving pattern.
And just to be clear, the north side of each of these buildings is the exit. So here's the exit for F, entrance is south.
Yes.
Just so we're clear, because moving this is pretty close
Right.
to alignment. But either way, I got you. We'll take that design, just so we're on the same page. We'll take that back and see what we can do to improve that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cahill. Mr. Renner, anything else?
Thank you. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, sir, thank you.
That's it,
Okay,
sir.
any of the other
Thank you.
board members have any questions?
I do.
Okay, Mr. Pink, how are you?
Okay. I just have one or two questions. Are the roads one-way or two-way within the facility?
Which roads?
Any of the roads that you can drive on?
Yeah, I see a lot of them are noted with the arrows.
They're all two-way with the exception of two areas where I pointed out. The loops that go behind the pad sites are one-way circulation in a counterclockwise direction, so the drive-through operates. The only other area that's one-way is entrance only on this driveway where I'm highlighting, which is closest to the right in off of Route 9. And I explained the reasoning why is that A, we don't want cars to exit out here too close to cars coming in, but entering here alleviates, provides an option for the people going to building K that may not need to come up to this intersection, do not have to cut through the convenience with gas. They can bypass that and come straight off the highway. I assimilate it to the shopping center in my town where they provide the extra little cut in for the Wegmans instead of going through the main spot and circulating through multiple intersections. This spot, knowing that this operates kind of differently than elsewhere on the number of employees and the visitors during the day, you can shortcut it. And this is the one-way in. Then it becomes a two-way aisle. Everywhere else is essentially a two-way aisle.
Well, based upon what you're saying, is there any limit on the size of trucks coming in? Or is there a separate truck entrance? And if so, is there a size limit that you must be over to use that truck entrance? And also, the other question I had is, what about double parking on the quote main streets? Even though the cars aren't parked there, with trucks stopping just for a couple minutes to park there, is there enough room for somebody to go around the trucks, or is that just going to build up more traffic trying to get past these double parked trucks?
So I make sure I understand clearly. I apologize if I didn't make it clear. The size of the vehicles utilizing the or delivering to the building A and building B, the grocer and the retail facility, they're typically WB67s, the largest vehicle along the road. It's designed to come in and out of this driveway. There's adequate space for those movements to occur. The other,
But that's on the, excuse me, but that's going into the driveway. What about getting to the driveway? They're riding on the main roads of the development. They have to get to that back area unless there's a separate entrance just for trucks over a certain size going to the back area.
So Schulmeister Road is coming off of Route 9.
Right.
Tractor trailers can utilize Route 9. They can come down Schulmeister and utilize a left turn lane to get into this service area in the back. There's recommendations to put some signage, truck entrance, employees only. We agree with that, but this is where the deliveries, the largest vehicles that will be on this shopping center, WB67s, will enter and exit and get back to Route 9.
How wide is
My
Schulmeister?
question is, going back to Route 9, they're going to be riding on one of the, again, what I consider to be the smaller roads.
What's the smaller road, Schulmeister?
Yeah.
That's a
How wide?
I'm not saying it's the smallest road, but it is bigger. And then if they have to get over to the left lane when you're coming out, it's just not the most convenient thing. And that's
I
what
would
I was
say
wondering about, making with trucks one way possibly.
I would
The
say
traffic may flow better.
I respectfully disagree with you that we're coming off the major highway on the widest road that has access to our shopping center that has a design driveway to come in one spot and exit that spot. Hence why we have the turnaround. I believe to separate truck traffic, we're going to the widest road, the safest area to have these vehicles. It's keeping it away from other options within this center. Otherwise, anywhere else, Portaluca is a 24-foot wide curb to curb. I do not want them going down there. I
agree with you. I agree with you on that. I agree with
So
you on
there's
that.
no other option. There's no other option to bring that size vehicle in. And I believe it's the safest route possible.
Mr. Cahill, how wide is Schulmeister?
It's 80 feet.
Okay, that's sufficient. And take into account the island on either side. So you're looking probably 30 feet on each side?
Yeah, you have 2 lanes of travel and a center turn lane. So you got the space. I think it's an 80-foot right of way, and the travel lane's like 78 feet or so. There's very little extra space there, but it's all utilized for the travel lanes.
Okay, sometimes it's hard to envision how wide the road actually is when you're looking at a drawing, but
Yep, understood.
I thank you for your help. I have one other question. Are there going to be within the driving area of the roads, are there going to be stop signs or lights or anything like that?
There's no traffic signals proposed. There's stop controls at all of the major intersections and points appropriately located for safety relative to the roadway network. We also have, where we have pedestrian crossings, we're proposing raised crosswalks to act as calming devices for traffic calming devices for the traffic circulating through the site.
Okay, thank you.
thank you, Mr. Pink. Anyone else from the board? Okay, so
Dean, I have a question.
yes, Mr. Lennon.
Would the police department have Title 39 for the roadways?
So,
Ken, you're on mute.
Yeah. Mr. Lenny, we have no issue requesting Title 39 be enforced on the property so that we know that we have the benefit of the police for traffic control.
Thank you.
yeah, typically as part of these approvals, we recommend that the applicant grant Title 39 authority to the township.
Yeah.
Great question, Casey. Thank you.
Hmm.
All right. Anybody else? Okay, Mr. Pape, where do we want to go from here? Who's your next witness?
The next witness is Frankie Campione, who is our architect, and with your permission, we'll bring him in.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. So I don't see Frankie in my screen. Maybe,
Mr. Chairman, just for clarification purposes, do we want to, since we did go through all the questioning of the witness, do you want to officially just open up the public's questioning of the Mr. Cahill, just so that we don't forget to do it later on?
Sure. Yeah. I was going.
I don't know if there is
that.
that many members of the public here or not, but I think maybe that way we just don't forget to do it later, since we did go through individual questioning of him by the board and the board of professionals.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. So we will open this up to the public. If there's anyone out in the public that has any questions, you'll see it on your screen and you can act accordingly. And Vina, do we see anybody? Any hands raised?
No, there are no hands raised.
Okay, we'll give it our customary 60 seconds. Which should be sufficient time for someone to raise their hand if they wish.
No raised hands.
Okay, another couple of seconds. Okay, we'll close the public session, being that there were no hands raised, and we'll move on to our next witness. Thank you, Mr. Sordillo.
Yes, there are no raised hands.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Pape, you can proceed. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm looking for there. Mr. Campione is here. Mr. Campione could be sworn, and then we'll share his credentials with you and go into his substantive presentation.
Mr. Campione, would you please raise your right hand? Do you swear that the testimony you're going to give this evening is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Could you please state your full name and spell your name for the record?
Frankie J. Campione, C-A-M as in Mary, P as in Peter, I-O-N as in Nancy, E.
Thank you.
Mr. Campione, would you share with the board and the board professionals your professional and educational background?
I am licensed, my home license is in New York, but I am licensed in New Jersey and have been for over 20 years. Currently in good standing through July 31st, 2023. I hold a Bachelor of Architecture degree from the University of Cincinnati.
And are you responsible for the architectural plans that have been submitted to the board for their consideration?
Yes, I am.
Mr. Chair, may I ask that Mr. Campione be accepted as an expert in his field as an architect and be allowed to so testify this evening?
Absolutely. Now, I just have a question for Mr. Sordillo. I heard you ask his name, but I didn't hear you swear him in. Did I miss it?
Yes, I swore him in.
Oh, you did? Okay, I'm sorry, I missed that.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Campione, thank you.
So, Mr. Campione, I'm going to ask if you could begin by identifying the exhibits that you would like to rely upon. And are you going to bring your own exhibits up, or do you want assistance from others?
I'm using the 22-page booklet that was submitted that's entitled Glenwood Green, Old Bridge, New Jersey, with the Regency Center's logo on the left, dated November 17th, I believe it is. I could either pull it up or you can drive, whichever you prefer.
Vina, is it okay for Mr. Campione to bring up his plans directly? Is that acceptable, Venus, that he'll bring the plans up directly?
Yes, I think Keith had mentioned that he would be sharing the plans, so.
If you can do it direct, it'd probably be better. I just didn't know if I knew he was traveling. so-
Okay, and I'm sorry, anybody not speaking, can you mute, please? We're getting a lot of feedback.
So just bear with
Thank
me
you.
for a second, because I would have to ask the host to give you permission, so I need to make a quick phone call.
If not, I can pull it up, Frank.
You can drive, Keith, that's okay. If you want to pull it up.
Let's do it that way.
I was gonna start on
While
page-
we're figuring that out, Mr. Pape, can you just, is this just the same plans that were submitted to the board that we're going to be presenting, or have they been changed and we need to mark them as exhibits?
They are the same plans that were submitted to the board.
Okay, so then if you could just reference which page what you're referring to, then we don't have to mark them separately as exhibits. But if there has anything been changed, then please let us know. We'll mark them as a separate exhibit.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, the documents I have on file are dated October 14th,
Yeah,
2021.
I was just
And
gonna
this
say,
file has a November date.
yep. And Frankie, I have the other one too. And the only change you made was the request on the ID sign on the backside. So we could either mark these as exhibits each time, or I could just pull up the one that was submitted, because you didn't change anything on any sheet other than the last sheet, which we conferred with Vina on the freestanding ID signs, and you're not really going to testify to that.
When you say ID signs, you mean the pylon signs, correct?
Pylon signs, yep, the freestanding pylons.
That's fine. If you want to use the other one, that's fine. It's the same order.
Okay, so give me a second. I got to pull that up. I had the other one.
Keith, you may have to continue sharing. I'm not able to. Okay, I just got a response. In 2 minutes, you should be assigned as a co-host and you can share your screen then.
I'll have Keith continue to share because he has the one from October and I only have the one from November with me.
Yeah, give me a second. Attorney submission 10:15. Okay. Uh-oh.
Yeah, you're able to share now, Frankie.
I know, but we want to keep it with me.
No problem.
Can you keep it with me?
You're still the co-host. You should be able to share.
There we go. Okay, does that work? October 14th, 2021.
Thank you, Keith. Good to go?
I'm good. You tell me when you want to click.
Okay, sounds good. Well, thank you very much. You're a hard act to follow, Keith, and extremely thorough. I'll do my best. So yeah, if you'll hold it right here on the site plan for a second, just to further introduce our credentials. Obviously, we're the design and executive architect for Glenwood Green, and we've had the honor of working for Regency Centers, not just on this project, but we date back all the way to 2004. As far as similar endeavors, we're licensed in 34 states. We've literally got millions of square foot of built and renovated commercial property. Throughout New Jersey, some of the projects you might be familiar with: Nassau Park, Hamilton Marketplace, Centerton Square in Mount Laurel, New Jersey. And closer to home in your backyard, we are also the architects for Old Bridge Gateway Center, currently under renovation. There are 12 buildings proposed on this site. There will be no less than 4 project architects involved. So while we're the design and executive architect for the entire center, it's not uncommon for a project of this size to have other project architects that will be responsible for doing additional construction documents. We've set the tone and character for the entire design of the center, and we'll be overseeing the other architects' work and have been in order to prepare all these elevations that have been submitted to you. We will be the project architect on at least 3 of these structures and maybe up to 7 of them. The 2 large anchors, the medical building and the fueling station, will most likely be by others when it comes time to submitting documents for construction drawings. If you can go to the next page, please, on building A, 80,500 square feet. Click to the next page, please. Average height is 24-foot parapet with key elements at 28'6" and 35'10". It's quite a large building. I don't want anyone to be alarmed by the dimension of 35'10" for the key entry element on the left-hand side. To put it into 80,000 square foot building, as I mentioned, to put it in perspective, if you're used to national tenants such as Ross, Dress for Less, they are now 38 feet high on a building only a third of this size. So we think we've kept the buildings in check with regard to height, pedestrian scale, but visibility as well from across the parking lots. Building B, if you can go to the next one, is 135,965 square feet. And if you click to the next elevation, their average height is 26 foot high with 30 and 36'6" key element on the left-hand side. Building C, D, and E, all 14,250 square feet with an average building height of 24 feet and key features that range from 27 to 30 to 28, but all 3 being different. So while they're the same footprint, the facades have actually been designed differently, as are G, H, and I. J is the fueling station at 5,000 square feet. Building K, is the medical building, 3 stories tall. And page 20, that's the building K's building materials, which are similar to ours in building. And page 20 actually indicates the retail palette color material variations that were used throughout the entire project. If we can go back to some of the building elevations, or if the board would like to remain here at materials, it's okay with me one way or the other, but I'd like to go back, if you would please, to building C, D, or E. The design of the buildings were meticulously curated, and they provide a canvas that allows for a system of organization for tenant identities into a cohesive whole. The design, which provides a uniform character with canopies and signage at uniform heights, but will allow the tenants will be permitted, if not encouraged, to vary their signage. We're not looking to have one color backlit red plexiglass sign band here that's prevalent throughout most shopping centers, but we're encouraging the tenants to have backer boards, pin letters, building mounted or canopy mounted signage, painted fascia signs, dimensional if not carved letters as well. On page 21 is the pylon sign that was just mentioned while we were setting up. And you'll see that the pylon sign has architectural features that tie into the architecture of the building. Going back to page 21, just back one, an elaborate sign study was provided that cross-references building and by tenant, but a simpler one was provided by Keith. I don't know how easy that one is to pull up or not, Keith, but you had provided a much simpler sign study because we understand the building architecture hasn't been what's been in question thus far. I think we've, not to pat ourselves on the back, but working with Regency, we have really scrutinized the building architecture itself and had all the tenants conform to a vernacular that I think sets the tone going forward. But what we're trying to do here is we understand that if you go to any of the retail buildings, Keith, only one sign per tenant is allowed, and the front is considered the storefront is considered the front. So we understand that all buildings are going to require a sign variance to have multiple signs. But I respectfully want to remind you that that if you visit any newer shopping center these days, that multiple signs and fascias are really the prevalent look, because what we're trying to create here is 4-sided architecture with no backs, in keeping with, and more importantly, the successful shopping centers that are there and shopping center design right now. This is the way you see buildings articulated on all 4 sides. There was mention, I think Vina had mentioned the inclusion of large-scale wall murals. You can see that one of them outlined on the bottom right-hand side on the south elevation. But from an architectural viewpoint, we don't consider the murals signs in the manner that most sign ordinances were originally conceived and written. In our professional opinion, these are wall graphics, they're art, they'll be commissioned or curated. They're not intended to be advertisements or billboards for branding, product, nor the tenants themselves. This is a cost that's going to be absorbed or subsidized by Regency centers. They're really meant to be enticing and exciting and enliven the center. I'm sure you've seen them throughout the country in other shopping centers or sides of hotel buildings, sometimes on Instagram. They're great photo opportunities. They beautify the facades, especially when carefully placed. And so these have been actually thought about in consort with the designs. When we were coming up with the building facades, they were purposely left such that we could add murals in these locations. We went back and forth with Regency, believe it or not, for weeks on end, trying to find locations where these could be included. And they have done this successfully in other centers. But we think they will help enliven the shopping center itself while bringing four-sided architecture to the building. The majority of the building materials are prevalent throughout. There's brick, there's CMU, there's siding, and of course, I would be a hypocrite if I didn't say that there was going to be some IFAS used on the buildings. But what you can see is we've really given the tenants a canvas to which to work with, so that if they want to add some color, if they want to add some pop with some graphic signs, all of which will be submitted individually when they go for their sign permits to you, et cetera. But the idea is been presented here, as you can see, with backer boards in different colors and size and locations accordingly. That's basically a quick run through months and months of design work with our client.
Mr. Chair, I have no further direct examination of Mr. Campione. I think at this point, comments from your professionals, if acceptable to the chair, would be appropriate.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, board professionals, Vina?
Mr. Campion, do you have any samples or any existing photographs of such murals that have that you have implemented? Because I mean, I have seen murals. I remember a few months back when Rebecca had reached out to me asking how these murals would be treated. I had gone back, looked at the ordinance. The township's ordinance specifically prohibits any wall painted murals such as these. So just so that the board has an idea as to what these would look like when they are done, do you have any samples that you could present to the board, or maybe at the next meeting?
Absolutely, we would definitely submit them to you as examples.
Because my concern, especially now that I'm looking at the rear side of the building, right? My concern, and for the board, if you see there is a dotted line along the white or the grayish, yes, that is the entire thing is the mural space. And when I was reviewing it originally, when I just saw the architecturals, I was like, okay, it looks like these are rear entrances, and if it is meant to direct or guide the loading activity, then you don't need such big fascia signs. But then I realized that the loading activity is actually going to be on the front side of the building. So then I noticed the mural, and now when I think about it, with the mural and with each tenant having the same size of sign as the front of the building, I hope it's not a sign clutter. So for the board to have an idea, we would like to see some pictures of existing centers or existing murals that you have done, so that we can, or rather I can comment on it. Because if there is a mural, I would suggest that the signs may be smaller. But unless I see a sample, I wouldn't be able to gauge that. And yes, Mr. Campion is right. The way the ordinance is written, only signs that are on the storefront are permitted. So per storefront, one sign is permitted. Everything else requires a variance. And for each building, I had a set of questions. Can we quickly go over those so that we know we have addressed those questions? Freestanding sign, we already covered. Buildings A and B, I think the first one is covered. Some of them are just minor errors that need to be fixed. Now, proposed signs B5 and B6 front on the ShopRite village lot. And I had asked, why do we really need that sign? But I'm assuming that the applicant is assuming that at some point the adjacent lot will be built and there will be some sort of common access between the two lots, and that sign would be required in that instance. Right now it's vacant, but doesn't mean it will remain vacant. Before, again, it's a sign on the rear side of the building, and the question was, why do we need that sign? Building C, D, E, I think those are similar comments for most of the signs. Do you have any comments to the questions that were raised in the memo?
Which way should I start? Should I start with them?
Let's club them together. Let's do building C, D.
Well, can we go back to
F.
the murals? Actually, if we go, I can bring up examples of the murals.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay.
So
Hold
Keith,
on.
you may have to give me control and see if I can.
I stopped.
Can you see my screen?
Not yet. There you go.
See a screen with a storefront and then a woman going up the stairs?
Yep.
Shadow, yeah, yep.
Okay, well, that's not, well, it's not her shadow, actually.
Yeah.
Okay, so what you can see here is there's on the left side, hopefully my screen is sharing properly. On the left side is a storefront, and painted on the brick wall is this man with the balloons in silhouette, or this girl here with the baby and the balloons. To the right, you can see the staircase going up, and it looks like there's a silhouette, or there is a silhouette, but it's painted of these family walking up the stairs. And then it's as I was mentioning, a photo op, because then that is a real woman walking up the stairs in between the silhouette of the mural on the wall. I can just show you some other ones. So this is a center that Regency Centers did, Midtown, shops at Midtown East. You can see what the walls looked like before they were painted, and then after, in some of these, to give a great looking effect. Here on the left-hand side, the Raleigh City of Oaks with live painting. This one happens to have a lot of black and white silhouette type work because of the artists that they worked with. I don't know if Chris Widmeyer from Regency wants to speak further to this. This was sort of his labor of love and used on the building, but you can see what it could be. There's lots of different ways that this could be treated. We've seen them. I'm sure you've seen the very famous one that's gone all around the, viral, as they say, with the butterfly wings, and you can stand behind it and you got the big butterfly wings behind you. But it's curated, right? It's not something that we're just going to slap together and throw on the wall, or graffiti art or something like that. And should it be approved, we can work with you on having the artwork approved before it gets implemented on the wall. But you can see the intent is nice work, and well thought out, as opposed to just a graphic or a Coca-Cola billboard or something like that.
Sure. Thank you so much for sharing this. I would recommend to the board, they're really tastefully done. I would recommend that should the board act favorably on it, the applicant works with us to kind of finalize them. But obviously the pictures give you an idea as to what we would be seeing on the rear side of the building. I know there were blade signs proposed on those buildings. Can you provide us with the details before the next meeting for those blade signs?
You're talking about the blade signs that were mounted under canopy on the fronts
Yes.
of B, C, D, and E? Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just for record-keeping purposes, I would recommend that we just label the photos that were just presented to the board as Exhibit A4, which can be identified as photos of various murals, including at the shops at Midtown East and Raleigh City at Oaks, if this is acceptable.
Excellent, sure.
Okay, and I'm taking notes, provide blade sign details for under canopy.
Yes. With building F, G, and H, I know that the building fronts on the parking lot and the rear side of the building faces Route 9. I had asked a question and it was meant just to guide the board, but although it's the rear side of the building, that is the side that will be visible when you are traversing on Route 9. And so although the signs require a variance, I think those signs are necessary for identification purposes. So number of these signs actually are more necessary because of the scale of the project, the location, and for identification. With menu board signs for the drive-through, Keith already addressed before the next meeting, we will have, he will research and provide our office with those details. Same thing with the gas station. If there are any canopy signs, the applicant has agreed to provide those details to us prior to next meeting. And then building L, I was just curious, you have signs proposed on each of the side. Why do you need so many of them? The medical office building. Do you need all 4 sides to have a sign is the question for the medical office building.
Who are you asking that question of?
To the architect.
Mr. Campione?
A moment, I'm getting there.
Okay. I wasn't sure if you could hear us.
Sorry about that. Building L sits out.
K.
Excuse me?
It should be K, Frankie.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, I was gonna say building L is not the medical office building.
Can
L
you,
is-
I don't have the site plan in front of me.
Okay, I'm sorry. Well, K is the 3-story building. I'm trying to pull it up, but I'm
I
looking.
got it. So you have a,
Right, so they've got their corporate identity located on 3 or 4 sides of their building because they have visibility from all 3 sides. If you scroll back to the site plan on page 2.
you know what, I didn't get to this one faster.
Bottom
Mr.
right.
Campion, since we are on this page,
So
and
you have
sorry,
it,
So not unlike building L and all the freestanding buildings, they are 4-sided architecture with no backs, with visibility predominantly from 4 sides. So that's why they're going for the graphic.
All right. And since we are on this page, I believe I had brought this up when we in one of the meetings that for the freestanding sign, the one that is at the bottom, if you can scroll down slightly, yes. Generally, when you have these posts, we would consider them as pole signs. And my recommendation was to fill up the base so that it is one large monument sign. And I believe the applicant had agreed to adding the base. So
We
would that be
did
something?
actually. We did. That's the difference between this set in October and the one that's November.
Okay.
We could bring that up and we could submit that as an exhibit now, if you like.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Sure.
Give me a second.
Sure.
Yeah, we could just identify the last page dated with the November date being submitted as Exhibit A5.
Hope I didn't make anybody sick.
Right, so if you zoom in there for me, Keith, you can see that we have filled in that space on all the proposed signs now.
And this is concrete base, and this is landscaping in front of it.
Correct.
Same with
Perfect.
all of them.
Perfect.
Correct.
And I had a question related to the gas station sign, that the gas station sign will advertise only for the convenience store and gas station and not any other tenants, but only because, not that it's an issue, it's just that the way I evaluated the signs are that you need one sign per frontage. You're allowed one secondary sign, but this sign, the gas station sign, is required because it's a gas station. A gas station is allowed a separate sign of its own. So just to make sure that we have the right variances covered, I had raised that question, and I know Keith had mentioned that this will not advertise any other tenant but the gas station and convenience store. Is that correct?
Yep. That's what you can see in this elevation.
All right, perfect. The one last thing, and I don't know if the memo really has that comment, but I did not see any lighting proposed for the fascia sign. And so what is the intent?
On the pylon here or on the
No,
building?
no. I mean, let's since we're on the pylon sign, is there any lighting? Is that indirect lighting, or what is being proposed here?
The tenant panels would be illuminated from behind, so that they would glow like a typical tenant panel. The Glenwood Green sign, we have yet to work out those details, whether they would be face illuminated or if they would be halo illuminated from the back.
All right, and what about the fascia signs on the buildings?
So as I might have gone through it too quickly, on the buildings, it's the intent to allow the tenants, if you go to the inline, it's the intent to allow the tenants to get creative with them. So we don't want to set a tenant criteria where everyone's just a backlit channel letter, red plexi type thing. So what we're identifying now on the elevations without actually identifying tenant names is showing that they could be different. So if you see the tenant on the left is within their sign area on the actual canopy. You can see it on the left side where he's actually, the pin letters are sticking up from the canopy itself. You go one tenant to the right, and if you move your cursor to the left, you can, I'm sorry, Keith, make you have to drive, but if you move your cursor to the left, you can see the side elevation, no, more to the left, you can see the letters actually pinned up right there, exactly. Then when you start to move tenants, to the right, they could be backlit channel letters, they could be pinned off the building, they could be on a backer board. We would like the tenants to get creative with the canvas backdrop that we've given them. And since each of them, my understanding is each of them needs to come in and obtain a sign permit, you would have the opportunity to review each tenant sign as it comes in for approval. So the idea here is that we're going to give them a criteria of options, and we would prefer that they're not all the same.
I mean, I would like to, before the next meeting, I would like to just revisit this part on my end with Rakesh as well, because I don't want it to be a free fall either. There has to be some sort of scheme or some sort of design flow to the lighting or the type of signs. It's good that we have the sign area already marked up, but with lighting too, I just want to revisit, and maybe I will come back and make a comment in front of the board at the next meeting. And Rakesh and I can discuss this further.
Would that be something that we could, in mall work, we call it a tenant criteria on when we're doing large malls or outlet centers and so forth. If would that be something that we could work on with you or before the next meeting to develop a 1 or 2 page sign criteria that starts to set that tone?
Yeah, sure.
Because I think, I don't want to speak for my client, but having worked with them for so many years, I'm assuming that they would wind up developing something like that anyway as part of their lease documents for the tenants to promote that creativity that we're talking about. So all we're doing is accelerating that slightly and get that done now.
That's all on my end, Chairman.
Okay. Anything from any of the other board professionals regarding Mr. Campione's testimony?
I don't have anything for the applicant's architect, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and I'm thinking we're approaching the 11 o'clock hour, so I think what we'll do is we'll open it up to the board, we'll open it up to the public, and then we'll move to adjourn. Is that acceptable to everybody?
From the applicant, it's as you direct, Mr. Chair. That would be fine.
Okay, very good. Okay, so I will open up to the board members. Any questions for Mr. Campione?
Mr. Chairman, I have one comment.
Sure,
It's
Mr. Renner.
quite frankly just scrubbing of slide 15. Slide 15, when you look at building K from a building elevation standpoint, plan view, on the, what I presume is the west side, we see 2 doors. And although you may need them from a means of egress, now go back to slide 15. On the west side, you see the 2 doors on the left of the drawing. Slide 15, you got it right there.
Yeah.
You see those 2 doors that are drawn in?
Mhm.
All right, so now go to either of the following views. Go to slide 16 or 17. What you essentially have is the front and the rear. You've got 2 sets of double doors on the front and on the back. And on the side, you have a single door on each side. So it appears it's just a minor scrub.
Understood.
Although you illustrated 2 doors on that side, they're not actually 2 doors there. Although from a means of egress, you may need it.
I will
Obviously, you can't
confirm
tell
with
that
the
without
tenant.
seeing it.
I'll confirm with the tenant prior to the next meeting, which is correct. If they're looking for a man door and a service door, or if the elevations are correct, then it's only 1 door.
That's correct. That's correct. And if it is the 2 doors, they would be on the opposite side where the gen set is, which is the east side.
Okay, we will, I'll use your term, we'll scrub that and clarify.
That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rana. Anybody else on the board?
I have a question.
Okay, Mr. Lenning?
How often do you change the murals on the buildings?
Good question.
That's a very good question. And one of the nice things about them, as opposed to building architecture, I'm gonna show my age. You know, I can remember when pediments were all the rage and everybody was doing postmodern architecture in their shopping centers, and how many of those from the 80s and 90s are now in dire need of change. What's nice about the murals is it allows for an area to be changed more often to keep the project relevant. Or if they're not in vogue anymore 7 years down the road, because the retail life expectancy of change is usually 5 to 7 years, but we can't change buildings that often. It's just too costly, but we could with the murals. So I think it becomes a combination of wear and tear on the mural itself, how many people are going up to it and touching it, and whether or not it could just be touched up, whether or not it maintains its relevancy. But I would say, unless Regency wants to clarify, I would say we're looking at a 5 to 7 year life expectancy on most murals.
Okay. And you had mentioned that you're willing to work with the township, with the first round of artwork. In the future, would the client be willing to work with us, reviewing everything before they changed it?
I don't, again, I don't know. I don't see why not. So unless our client speaks up against that, I don't think there would be an objection to that being a condition.
That's fine.
On behalf of the applicant, that request is fine.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think there needs to be some oversight, whenever any revisions need to be made or requested to be made. Okay, great question, Casey. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else on the board? And if not, Vina, can we open it up to the public? Open up Mr. Campione's testimony to public questions? Do you see any hands raised?
No.
Okay, we'll give it the customary 60 seconds. Maybe being it's so late, we'll give it 30 seconds. Okay, Vina, still no hands raised?
No.
Okay, we'll close out the public portion. Okay, Mr. Sordillo, do you want to summarize anything, or before I?
Well, I think, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think at this point, it's just to note to the public that we're going to be closing or adjourning, I should say, the public hearing on this application for the evening, given the time. The applicant did provide notice for the next meeting in its original notice, so that covered it, because given we have so many meetings coming up and the limited time frame in between. So Ken, can you just confirm that which date that we put that in there? I just forget.
Surely.
What notices I reviewed, I forget which is which.
Yeah. No, if I want to comment on the notice, we knew that we had been scheduled for tonight and December 7th. That we knew that there was not an opportunity to do a separate notice in between that would meet the 10-day requirement. So we worked carefully to have a very clear notice that there were two hearings, and there's two separate sets of instructions with the date. I think that if we had sent two notices, we would have confused everybody, but by having one comprehensive notice, we accomplished our goal. So we did for December 7th, we are properly noticed.
And
Thank you.
just for the record, Mr. Paper, we're not that easily confused.
No, not the board members. I just had visions of people getting a letter from me that says, you got a meeting, be there on the 30th. And then the next day getting one that says, oh, and there's another meeting. It's the same applicant and it's on the 7th. And them saying, now what does that mean? So,
Yeah.
yeah, no,
Mr. Chairman, I'm already confused.
I'm with you.
yeah. So we are properly noticed for that. I want to thank everyone this evening. Our goal was to make a comprehensive presentation to you. I think the two gentlemen who testified accomplished that. Our goal.
I think they exceeded that. Yes.
Well, that's very nice of you. That's very nice of you, Mr. Chair. Our goal, and throughout the evening, all of the people who are on our team have been taking notes. Mine are pretty copious. We have recorded the comments that were raised by board members. We have recorded the comments that were raised by your professional staff. In fact, your professional staff had given us a little heads up on some of those points in advance. We have a reasonable amount of work and a reasonable amount of time. Our goal is to work with your staff over the next couple of days and to be prepared through exhibits, properly prepared exhibits, to be responsive to the comments that were raised. And our goal is, we have our fingers crossed, our goal is that we'll complete our presentation when we see you next. Henry Ney, our traffic engineer, Allison Coffin, our professional planner, are the witnesses who we intend to present, neither of whom is going to be as in-depth as the ones you heard this evening. I should say that they're both going to be in-depth. Neither one is going to be as long as the ones you heard this evening. So,
I'm sure just as thorough, and we appreciate your thoroughness and your attention to detail.
that's
Okay.
that's
So
very kind of you.
I will, Mr. Shodillo, should I put up
We
the
just,
motion?
unfortunately, we got one last public hearing got to open because it's we have to open up to general public comments to anything that's
okay.
not necessarily an application. I
Okay.
know there's probably at this hour not too many people, but technically we have to do it in compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act.
Well, then, Mr.
Let's open it up for,
I'm going to say goodnight to you and say thank you for hearing us this evening as you do your final administrative elements.
excellent. Thank you, Mr. Paper.
Good night, all.
Good night. Okay, so we are opening it up to a general public comments for all testimony heard from the onset of this meeting till now. And we'll give it this one will give the customary 60 seconds, even though we're pretty sure nobody has their hands raised.
No raised hands.
Okay.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, I did want to just make one note while we're waiting. On the Bright Point housing application, the attorney Amanda Curley was actually here. She had some troubles logging on as a panelist, and she was in the public session, but couldn't get our attention to respond. She just wanted to let the board know that she emailed me separately. She wanted to let the board know that she didn't just ignore the board and didn't appear. She was here and was ready to address any questions on the adjournment request. Just couldn't to get logged on.
Couldn't get on. Yeah, we understand technology issues. Okay, thank you for that. Okay, and we're beyond our 60 seconds. So we didn't see any raised hands. We didn't have any questions. So we'll close the general public session. And then I will put it to a motion to adjourn for this evening and continue to the 7th. Do I have a motion?
I'll move it.
Mr. De Palma again. And second
I'll second it.
I'll
by
second it.
Mr. Pink. Or Mr. Wren, Mr. Pink. Okay, we're all set?
When is our next meeting? Tomorrow?
This coming Tuesday, correct?
Yes. Can I take a roll call?
Absolutely.
Mr. De Palma,
Yes.
Mr. Renner, Mr. Lauer,
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt,
Yes.
Mr. Lenning,
Yes.
Mr. Pink,
Yes,
Chairman Marucci,
Yes.
Mr. Garcia,
Yes.
meeting adjourned.
Okay, so we got the motion a second. I want to thank everybody for their dedication. Tonight was a long one, and I appreciate it. And we'll see you again on Tuesday.
night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you.
Have a good night.
Right.
Good night.